Chapter 1004. Kill. Jaden was a big boss who had a lot of things to deal with every day. He didn't have the time to beat around the bush with Duke. After all, Duke was one of them, so he went straight to the point. I'm here to give you a mission. Go to a planet called Azeroth and open a portal that allows the entire army to pass through. As long as you complete this, not only will you be able to bind your soul to the twisting nether, but you will also be able to choose one item from my collection as your family heirloom. Hearing this, Duque was so happy that his heart was about to fly out of his chest. Damn, he was finally sure that that bastard Nozdormu did not send him at the wrong time. It was indeed the eve of the ancient war 10,000 years ago, and if he was not wrong, he was very likely to replace Manarotha's position. Although he was happy, Duque showed another characteristic. I promised to complete the mission. I only have one small question. You ask, I may not answer. Kill. Jaden showed enough arrogance. I want to ask, sir, did you give me your reward the moment I opened the portal? Duque rubbed his hands, his face full of eagerness like the greediest goblin. This time Duque's desire was not fake. According to normal history, he would only have the chance to overthrow Kill. Jaden and snatch his mother after at least 10 years. He did not expect to have the chance to get Dandon's collection in advance. It would be strange if Duque was not tempted. This kind of undisguised greed made Kill Jaden admire him greatly. Haha. The Burning Legion is never stingy with rewards. As long as the portal you open is large and stable enough, when the main force of the Burning Legion's first fleet enters Azeroth, how about I reward you with 3 treasures? Then it's a deal? Kill. Jaden seemed to be satisfied with this meeting. He waved his hand and a scorching fen wind rose in the room. If the dark force surrounding Duque was slightly weaker, Duque would have been a charred corpse by now. You have my promise. Go and rest first. You also need to adapt to the sudden increase in power in your body. My aide will give you the details tomorrow. Duque bowed deeply to Dandon and retreated. The moment Duque retreated, the Eridar twins appeared on the 2 floating platforms. What do you think? Kill. Jaden put on a fake smile. Every breath he took was accompanied by a huge amount of flames. Smart, sharp, ruthless, insightful and shrewd. If he's from the Eridar tribe, then he'll definitely be an outstanding demon, Alyssa said. One thing to note, he's very greedy. I sensed that he had an almost twisted obsession with exquisite equipment. Queen Sololas let out a pleasant chuckle. Not only that, although he hid it well and never dared to look us in the eye, I'm sure that he wants to enslave us. Oris also chuckled. Haha. Ha. Kill. Jaden laughed maniacally. His laughter was so loud and terrifying that it actually shattered the decorations in the hall and the stone pillars hanging at the top of the hall. They fell into the lava pool and splashed high into the air. The Eridar twins bowed at the same time with a charming smile on their faces. Those inferior races that were destroyed by our hands call us demons. Since we're demons, what's wrong with being greedy? What's wrong with destroying? What's wrong with trying to dominate everything in the world? Remember, it's never desire that's wrong. The only mistake is that you don't have enough power to satisfy your own desire. The twins lowered their heads even more. They had already confirmed that their master had a good impression of the new lord of the inferior race, the Infernal Affairs. However, as a demon commander who was good at scheming, Kill Jaden was never stingy with his generous rewards, as long as you could complete his extremely harsh requirements. Furthermore, how could demons put all their eggs in one basket? On the other side, he retreated from the reception room. Under the guidance of a succubus, Duque first rejected the succubus' invitation to spend a wonderful night together, then directly returned to the suite that was arranged for him. In the living room that was filled with a sci-fi atmosphere, he saw the anxious Gromhell scream. Infernal Affairs, Master. Lord Howell, who was never a qualified actor, clearly knew that he was acting, called the Master, in an extremely obscure manner. Duque's face was cold as he proudly replied, Mantis Shrimp. I know that you've never accepted me. You don't recognize me as your master. This doesn't matter, I will make you kneel down in front of my power one day with a wholehearted heart. No matter what you want to ask, I don't have the time to answer you. Right now, I've received a mission from one of the highest commanders of the Burning Legion, Sir Kill Jaden. I need to go to Azeroth. If you have any questions, go to Azeroth and talk. With that, Duque flicked his sleeves and left in a domineering manner. His left hand pressed on the spherical button on the side of the door, and the glass-like sphere emitted a burst of green light. Then the door to the bedroom opened and Duque strode in. Before the door closed, Duque's words floated out. "I'm going to rest. Don't disturb me before Kill Jaden's adjutant arrives." The door seemed to be closing slowly, but it was actually closing very quickly. Grom, who seemed to be in a daze, was left behind in the middle of the hall. But in fact his heart was already in turmoil. Wait until we get back to Azeroth? Is there someone watching here? But doesn't that mean Duque's fine? He's fine. I've already fallen into madness after being stained with that little bit of demonic blood. He absorbed so much dark energy and he's still able to maintain his sense of self. Grom stood with his right hand on his left chest, listening to his heartbeat and savoring the bitterness in his mouth. Suddenly, he raised his head 45 degrees and stared at the distorted void outside the porthole. His throat gurgled. It's so hard to not be able to repay a debt of gratitude. Grom was no longer young. Although in the eyes of his compatriots he was a great hero whose name was engraved on Orgrimmar's newly erected hero monument, a living legend. Only he himself felt that he who had wrongly encouraged everyone to drink the demonic blood did not deserve the title of great hero. Thinking back to the time when he fought against Manoroth, he survived thanks to Duque's help. After that day he had a very mysterious feeling. Not only did he escape a curse that was destined to lead to tragedy, but he also seemed to have broken the noose of fate. It was a vague feeling of fate. But his intuition, which had never been wrong in his life, told him that it was correct. Chapter 1005. He had thought countless times about helping Dooku and repaying the debt he owed to a human. Then he who did not owe the other party anything could die peacefully on the battlefield. Who knew that he would be saved by Duque time and time again. Now he had no choice but to shamelessly act like a coward in front of the evil demons and endure the humiliation. It was to return to 10,000 years in the future and report to Sar. Perhaps this humiliation was completely meaningless. Because once the evil demons found out, he would definitely die a horrible death. Now Duque was so powerful. He had not fallen, but he had tricked so many evil demons. He had even tricked the cunning Burning Legion's commander, Kill Jaden. He could return to Azeroth soon. What a hopeful ending this was. Even though he was in the enemy camp, he could not help me at all. Yet he still chose to help me, gave me hope and gave me the responsibility to lead my people back. Duque, you are too generous. How do you expect me to repay you? As expected, only a great hero like you can truly lead Azeroth to the future? For some reason, even though Grom wanted to cry, he laughed. Ha, ha, ha. He laughed loudly, impudently and bleakly. He had the boldness of a beast man. He also had the rich emotions that humans should have. Just like that, Grom could not sleep for the entire night. The next morning, the Eridar Gemini came. On the surface, the explanation was that the army wanted to snatch the Well of Eternity from the uncivilized low-class races. But what was in Azeroth and its connection to the Pantheon was not mentioned. As the saying went, everything that should be said was said without missing a word, and everything that should not be said was left unsaid. Even though he flattered Duque by saying that opening the teleportation portal would be considered a great contribution to the army, he knew that he was just a pawn to explore the path. It would be good if he succeeded. If not, he would just lose a non-Eridar lord. The Burning Legion had a 4-digit number of lords. Duque wouldn't make a difference whether he was there or not. An hour later, in the middle of the ancient Kalimdor continent on planet Azeroth, a glorious city was displaying its boundless charm in the night sky. Even the wind and rain could not conceal the magnificent radiance of this city. Azhara was a great city that was closest to the Well of Eternity in ancient times. The Night Elves used the power of the Eternal Well to build the Queen's capital city. Unlike Surlama, the High Elves living in Azhara did not worship the moon goddess Elun. Instead, they blindly worshipped the power of arcane magic. Because of this, they slowly alienated themselves from nature. Cenarius and the other demigods and druids were not welcomed here. The High Elves wanted magnificent city buildings and arcane magic. They believed that the power of magic could rule over everything. In Galhalla, a great city some distance away from Azhara. Although it did not have the tall and majestic Forbidden Palace of Azhara, It did not have the magical combination of stone and wood. But what Galhala possessed was enough to make all the elven druids in Sir Lama unable to sleep. On this stormy night, there was a mysterious air around it. Those who knew what it represented did not even dare to stare at the palace-like mage tower in the center of the city. People all shifted their gazes to avoid attracting the attention of the guards. Around the mage tower, the guards wore green armor and carried spears and swords as they carefully looked around. Not only did they monitor the outside of the city for trespassers, but they also paid special attention to the movements inside from time to time, especially the main tower. They seemed to have sensed that an unpredictable mysterious power was being nurtured. Not enough, not enough. Not enough at all. You bunch of idiots, when are you going to let that great existence descend? Savis was a powerful arcanist and a fanatic who was most obsessed with arcane magic and various mysterious powers. 10,000 years later, the forbidden experiments that the night elves, high elves and humans had strictly forbidden were not a problem at this point in time. As a noble high elf noble and the queen's chief advisor, all of his experiments were approved by the queen. Under his leadership, the wizards of Galhala began a ritual that was performed every night. In order to complete the ritual, they had to constantly rearrange the magic jades and arcane crystals to demarcate the boundaries of magic power so that the magic power could better play the role of the summoning circle. Suddenly, there was movement between the crystals. Like a protective circle that was suddenly attacked, a few shields of light suddenly rose above the crystals. Unfortunately, the light disappeared in a flash. The crystals that were once filled with powerful magic power dimmed in large pieces. Although the wizards of Galhala were not as proficient in magic as the moon guards, they knew very well that what was happening now should not have happened. They immediately began to check the arrangement again and again, but still could not understand what was wrong. They don't seem to be absorbing magic power from the Well of Eternity, a young Cursemancer said. A young Cursemancer asserted, something is trying to cut off the energy flow from the front. Trash. Trash. All trash. Savis could no longer control his anger and lashed out at the young Cursemancer's face. Even though the Cursemancer had more than 10 methods to avoid or resist this whip, he still lowered his head and forcibly endured this whip, leaving behind a deep red mark on his rather delicate and pretty face. Suddenly Savis quivered. His expression became absent-minded. Yes. He heard a voice. Although it was a little vague, he heard all the key words clearly. By servant. I will send out a lord to assist you. A powerful lord, huh? That's great. I've been worrying about not being able to show Her Majesty the Queen the great power of the Burning Legion. Is there anything you need me to do? Let go of your soul. Enter a deep sleep. All right. Yes, great Lord Kill, Jaden. Under the strange gazes of all the magi, Savis actually fell asleep standing. He lowered his head and looked like he was on the verge of collapsing, as if he would fall to the ground in the next second. However, Savis moved. His slender fingers fluttered incessantly, and his intense movements formed a stark contrast with his blank expression. Lord. A magus cautiously approached Savis. They could not imagine what had happened to Savis. Chapter 1006. One by one, crystals brimming with mysterious magic were thrown out by Savis's dexterous hands, and they landed lightly on the ground. It looked no different from the magic circle that had failed before, but the order in which the crystals were laid out had clearly caused a special reaction that was different from the past. The magic circle lit up. A green brilliance that had never been seen before began to fill the entire magic circle, and powerful magic meandered around. Brighter, brighter, brighter. The next moment, a huge black shadow that was more than 10 meters tall suddenly cut through the void and descended from the sky. With an ear-piercing roar of thunder and lightning, it appeared majestically in the middle of the magic circle. Savis and the night elf sorcerers who had just woken up from their trance were stunned. They had completely lost their ability to speak as they stared at the huge figure, oblivious to everything else. It had huge bat wings like a giant dragon, sharp claws, and a body that was many times more muscular than a troll. From the head that was sunk deep in the shadow, 2 scarlet eyes with a gaze like lightning, fierce and lifelike. It was like the most arrogant emperor looking down at these night elf arcanists as if they were ants. It smiled. In its open mouth, there were thousands of sharp fangs of various sizes, emitting the most primitive terror. What was even more terrifying was its aura. It was majestic like a collapsing mountain, like a falling star. It was as if just by standing there, it could squeeze the air out of the lungs of the night elves bit by bit, and they could no longer inhale the slightest bit of oxygen. It was a terror that was close to suffocating, but Savis felt that his heart was not because of a lack of oxygen but because of ecstasy. That's right. Powerful. Only this kind of power was worthy of being the messenger of the supreme existence in his heart. A lord of the Burning Legion. At that moment, Savis's eyes were filled with tears of excitement. The intense magical wave finally subsided. What appeared in front of them was indeed a gigantic and terrifying pure black giant. Beside him was a rather tall and burly green silhouette. Unfortunately, the giant was too huge and the elves subconsciously ignored the green figure beside him. Was it a dark energy lord? Or a dread lord? There was an irrepressible excitement in Sarva's heart. However, in front of all the elves, the huge black figure seemed to have exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and shrunk rapidly, turning into a humanoid creature that was slightly shorter than the night elves. Moreover, his aura was quickly fading away. Human. Savis couldn't hide his astonishment. In his impression, creatures with this appearance were called humans. They were a group of barbarians who basically did not wear any clothes or used a piece of dirty animal skin to cover their lower bodies. This human did not look powerful, nor did he have any outstanding appearance. Perhaps he was tall among humans, but compared to the taller night elves, his appearance wasn't an advantage. Instead, the 2.5-meter-tall green giant behind this human stood out. A magus who looked rather experienced suddenly sneered, "Lord Savis, is this the Lord that you summoned from the distant, distorted void without hesitation at the expense of a huge amount of magic crystals?" Anyone could hear the sarcasm in the old warlock's words. But before Savis could speak, the young-looking human gently snapped his fingers. For some reason, even though the night elf's ears did not hear any sound, there was a huge tremor that went straight into the hearts of all the elves from the old warlock's head. Bam! If one had to give an onomatopoeic word, that would be it. This was not any type of physical attack, and it had nothing to do with arcane spells. It was a pure spiritual attribute. It easily shook this old warlock, who was considered one of the top-ranked warlocks in the Azhara dynasty, to the point that he was dizzy on the spiritual level. The old warlock was horrified and tried to retreat. Just then, the green monster suddenly raised a huge one-handed axe high, and a scarlet light flashed. The double magical shield that wrapped around the old warlock was as fragile as an eggshell, and was easily broken. In the next moment, 2 long legs dressed in luxurious fabrics were sent flying. But the old warlock's remaining body completely defied the laws of physics, and even after receiving the horizontal impact, everything above the knee was still stuck straight into the ground. No, the bones that were already exposed were actually forcefully inserted into the obsidian ground. The old warlock did not faint, but every curve on his face was condensed with fear, and every inch of his eyes was filled with despair. That scene was truly evil. A wave of fear that came from the deepest depths of their souls froze the bodies of every night elf present, including Savis. Only then did the Lord speak slowly, and he was surprisingly fluent in Kadoriai. "There have been countless beings who have tried to look down on me with their height. But every time I've closed the gap between us, no one would dare to look at me like that anymore. Remember, Savis, if anyone dares to do this again, I'll cut off everything above the neck." As soon as he said that, all the elves in the surroundings felt a sudden impact on their spirit seas. That was, planets destroyed one after another. Millions upon millions of slaughtered creatures. At the same time they let out howls of despair, awe. No elf could withstand such a terrifying spiritual impact. In an instant, there was no one left standing in the summoning hall other than the Lord and the burly green figure. After a while, Savis, covered in sweat as if he had been fished out of the water, actually scrambled over and prostrated himself in front of the powerful Lord of the Burning Legion. 100,000 apologies. These lowly mortals actually dared to offend the dignity of the Legion. As long as you give the order, I'll definitely sacrifice the lives and souls of these offenders to the Legion. Savis abandoned all restraint and dignity, and kept kowtowing with great humility. Humph. The Lord waved his hand lightly, and the once powerful old warlock suddenly turned into a large human-shaped torch, bathed in demonic green flames. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to scream, and even the surrounding elves could hear the tragic cries coming from his soul. But in that mouth, in his throat, in his vocal cords, not a single tremor could be produced. Just like that, he turned into ashes in a mere few seconds. The Lord spoke. My name is Infernal Affairs. But a name is just a code. You can also call me Mark Dooku. Chapter 1007. Who was Savis? Breaking Dawn Powerhouse. The second most powerful person in the Kador Empire. The first favorite of Queen Azhara. The famous king of nightmares in later generations. Could be said that he was the biggest spy in the ancient war and also one of the most important figures in the core. However, such a powerful figure was currently lying on the ground, shivering. He didn't even dare to raise his head to look at Duque. If Duque could return to the modern era immediately, he would be able to brag about this for the rest of his life. Grom, who was behind Duque, was also dumbfounded. He was really a little confused. Seeing this, even the brave and loyal Grom couldn't help but have doubts again. Has Duque fallen? Is he using his memories from before he fell to control me? Or is he not fallen and is still acting? Grom's anxiety to know the truth was almost burning his heart. Unfortunately, he couldn't do anything. He could only use his identity as Duque's lackey to continue threatening the night elves with his sinister mouth. Duque continued to play his role as the greater demon lord. Right in front of Savis, he said coldly, "Raise your head and look at me." Yes. Savis trembled as he raised his head. Yes. Under the gaze of Savis and the group of elven magi, Duque seemed to be moving in slow motion, turning his skin into an illusory black that was as dark as ink inch by inch. This shadow form, which was very common in the future, was something that had never been heard of before. In his black form, Duque's gaze was as sharp as a sword, fiercely cutting into Savi's face and heart. I am the greater demon lord of the Burning Legion, Infernal Affairs. What I know is only death and destruction. So don't try to challenge my authority in any way. Otherwise, be prepared for at least one city to be destroyed. Understood? Understood. Savis was so scared that he almost wet his pants and hurriedly agreed. Give me a moon well that hasn't been dirted. I want to take a bath. Yes. Savis hurriedly nodded. Without even looking at Sarvis, Duque deactivated shadow form and strode away. Grom followed behind Duque with blood roar on his shoulder. At this moment, Savis eagerly followed, nodding and bowing. Great Seamless, call me by my temporary name, Mark. Duque corrected. Sir Mark, I am carrying out this summoning ritual in the name of Queen Azhara. Do you have time to meet the Queen? Duque stopped, releasing an astonishing aura of power without anger. His gaze was so fierce that Savis actually had a terrifying, dazed feeling that Duque's eyes were blooming with the light of death, easily breaking his body into two. Are you ordering me? No. I dare not. Savis once again knelt on the ground with incomparable humility. This is just a suggestion, a small suggestion. Duque was secretly pleased, but unfortunately he could not show it on his face. He still looked domineering as he snorted coldly. I'm not in the mood for now. But seeing that you're still relatively obedient, I'll give this to you. With that, Duque threw out a few tubes that looked like test tubes flowing with green fluorescence. Savis hurriedly caught them. This is, give it to your enemy to drink. Just one drop and you'll get the powerful warrior you want. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Savis simply could not contain the ecstasy in his heart. He actually shamelessly crawled over and kissed Duque's right shoe. When he kissed for the third time, a look of disgust appeared on Duque's face. He withdrew his foot like lightning and kicked Savis in the face, leaving a pitch-black shoe print on this night elf noble's face. Frem, lead the way. Yes. Savis, the man who had brought great disasters to Azeroth many times in history, was now serving Duque like the most loyal servant. Grom, who was behind Duque, was dumbfounded and did not know what to say. At this point in time, the Kaldorii Empire had overused the water from the Well of Eternity. The Well of Eternity had long since turned into ink, and even rats were unwilling to drink the water. Fortunately, before the Well of Eternity had been polluted, there were still many moon wells that had cut off their connection to the Well of Eternity and maintained their purity. This was the case in a royal villa located 30 kilometers west of Galhala. Savis worshipped Duque and Grom as if they were gods, and let a large group of royal guards lead the way. Guarding beside Duque were the famous moon guards of the Kaldorii Empire, who cultivated both magic and martial arts. After leading Duque and Grom into this magnificent royal villa filled with arcane decorations and appliances, Savis tactfully left behind 12 beautiful but short elven maidservants and left respectfully. "My lord, please rest first. I will visit you again tomorrow at noon." Duque waved his hand impatiently as he dismissed Savis like a fly. His gaze then fell on the maidservants who were forcing a smile but were actually trembling. Perhaps Duque had asked Grom to shorten the height of the old elf wizard's legs, but it had left a deep impression on Savis. Savis had actually managed to find 12 elven maidservants who were slightly shorter than Duque. This was a very rare thing. One should know that the night elves had evolved from trolls, and the average height of the ancient night elves was more than 1.9 meters. The poor Duque had grown taller after adulthood, and after absorbing dark energy for a second growth spurt he was only 1.85 meters. This was not bad for a human's height, but for the night elves he was still half a head shorter. Duque almost wanted to say, "I'm in despair too." The 12 night elf maidservants, if not for their purplish skin color and the annoying facial wrinkles on Duque's face, would have been a good eye candy. The problem was that Duque had a belly full of secrets, and Grom's patience was almost at its limit. He could only say, "You may leave. I don't need your service." But the maidservant who seemed to be the head of the maidservants said bitterly. Duque threatened, "Do you see my servant's fangs? He's an out-and-out ferocious race. Once he goes berserk and eats you up, don't blame me for not warning you." The pitiful elf girl retreated in a panic, leaving the dumbfounded Grom behind. Grom almost wanted to curse. "Damn it, when did I eat someone?" Ignoring Grom, Duque quickly set up a magic circle and then soaked in the moon well like he was in a hot spring. The mysterious and strange prayer immediately echoed above the moon well. "Light comes from darkness and from darkness comes light." Chapter 1008. As someone who had witnessed a miracle with his own eyes, Grom knew that Duque had the ability to resist the darkness. This was also the biggest psychological support that kept him going. Even though he had seen it once, when Grom saw it again he could not suppress the excitement in his heart. His large heart was beating wildly in his wide chest. On the arm that was tightly holding onto blood roar, the veins were bulging like earthworms. Gritting his teeth and holding his breath, Grom did not dare to miss a single detail of Duque. He was afraid that Duque's conversion to darkness would fail, and he would truly degenerate into a terrifying leader of the Burning Legion. On Duque's chest a golden flame suddenly appeared. Like the first spark on a dry grassland, the golden flames quickly engulfed Duque's entire body like a prairie fire. Grom could see with his naked eyes that the dark power of darkness was being burned and purified. The darkness on Duque's body retreated like a defeated army, until it reached the area above Duque's neck. On his neck, the dark power, which had already turned dark, did not retreat, clashing fiercely with the power of light. Two powerful forces that mortals could only look up to, with the arteries and veins on Duque's neck as the battlefield, began an unimaginable slaughter. At that moment, Grom suddenly noticed that the water level in the well was dropping rapidly. The water level in the moon well the size of a baseball field was dropping at a rate of 1 centimeter per second. It was as if a whirlpool had appeared on Duque's body, and with an imposing manner, he sucked in the pure and flawless well water through his pores. 3 seconds later Duque suddenly vomited. Blarg! Not only did he vomit, but thick black ink was also gushing out of Duque's nostrils, ears and even his tear ducts. Ugh! It was a very strange scene. The well water that was sucked into Duque's side was pure white, and the side that he vomited on was absolutely black. The well water swirled clockwise, creating a mystical pattern similar to the Daoist yin-yang fish, Taiji diagram. Grom, who was watching from the side, felt a sense of awe and anticipation rose in his heart. As a former victim of the devil's blood, Grom was very clear on how chaotic that berserk power was. It was impossible for it to have this kind of behavior that was clearly on the side of order. Could it be that Duque, this monstrous human supergenius, Could even conquer the terrifying dark power of the Burning Legion? As Grom's thoughts ran wild, Duque's path of being a fraud continued. Light comes from darkness and from darkness comes light. The tune was even more divine than the brainwashing divine tune. After more than 10 minutes, the black sesame paste that Duque spat out finally became a sesame paste demon, and Duque became a sanctimonious priest wearing the skin of a holy golden priest. Looking at Duque walking down the stairs beside the moon well like the most devout believer, Grom had a strange expression on his face. He touched his coarse beard and asked, "Duque, you've finally converted the darkness in your body?" Duque smiled bitterly. "You could say that, but you've been through it. You know that even if most of it is gone, there will always be some left." Grom's respect for Duque grew. 2 times. The first time was when he dealt with Archaron. The second time was when he fought the dark power alone. Each time, Duque had chosen to sacrifice himself when he had a choice. Grom used to be tortured by the demon blood in his dreams, and he often woke up from his sleep because he could not suppress the violence in his heart. He was very clear about the side effects of the demon's power, so he did not dare to let any of his compatriots get close to him while he was sleeping for so many years, because he was afraid that he would tear his compatriots apart while he was unconscious. Feeling Grom's sympathetic gaze, Duque could only smile bitterly. If Grom's characteristic was anger, then Duque had all 7 sins. But due to his easygoing nature, most of the 7 sins had nothing to do with Duque except cough. Duque waved his hand at Grom. "I'm fine. Compared to the survival of the world and the continuation of history, my business is trivial." Then Duke told Grom a bunch of *T that even he didn't believe. "Remember, we are here on behalf of the Dragon of Time, Nozdormu, to preserve the original appearance of history." Huh. Am I sure I'm not here to destroy history? In our time the High Elves were a race that had been destroyed. The capital of the Kaldorii Empire was also blown up. Even if our ultimate goal is to save planet Azeroth, it does not mean that we are going to stop the Burning Legion. Nonsense. If we really did stop it, how could I steal equipment from Jaden? So, what we need to do is to go with the original development of history. It's fine if you don't know Azeroth's history, just listen to me. Good boy. Don't mess around. Don't be rash. I'll take you to steal equipment later. Grom's eyes reddened at Duque's words. The orc hero nodded heavily. Yes. I'll listen to you. Good. The dupe succeeded. Early the next morning, Duque had already sensed that Savis had been waiting outside. He paced back and forth anxiously, looking excited and nervous. The test tubes that Duque had given him had probably succeeded. Duque just had to leave him hanging. Every time Savis couldn't restrain himself and sent the pale elven girls to ask in whispers, "Has Lord Infernal Affairs woken up yet?" he would send the fiendish Grom to stop them without any makeup. "No. Don't talk nonsense, I'll eat you if you keep talking." This caused every single elf girl to go back in tears. At noon, Duke, who was putting on airs, finally called in a few pale elf ladies to help him change his clothes. Then after he finished eating the various delicacies specially prepared by the high elf chef, he called Savis in for a chat as though he was calling a fortune. Great Lord Mark Dooku." Savis was still humble and submissive, prostrating himself on all 4s. He didn't skimp on anything. Duque was happy to see this bastard who had betrayed his empire, his master and the planet. Duque raised his eyelids slightly. "What is it?" "My lord. The medicine you gave me is indeed miraculous. After seeing the results, my emperor was very happy. However, this is only for the enemy. Is there anything that can increase our strength?" But Savis also knew that Queen Azhara's request was a little too much, but he did not dare to disobey the request of the woman he deeply admired. Chapter 1009. Duque let out a mocking laugh, looking as if he had expected this from him. He then pointed his finger into the distance. "That pool over there is a strength potion specially made for you lot." Grom, the lousy actor, almost lost his act when he heard that. "Bloody hell, this is clearly your vomit from last night, and you have the cheek to say that it's a good stuff, specially made for the night elves. Oh no. This can't be the Duque I know. Could I have been fooled by his holy light? Why does it feel like the Righteous Alliance hero Duke Marcus, who would always act righteously, whether it was tricking his enemies or saving his own in times of danger, had changed so much. Is this really the influence of dark energy? Speaking of which, even the wild boars in the barren lands, which are said to have no fear of meat or fish, would not eat the disgusting black stuff in this pool. Would the night elves want this? Grom's grimace gave Duque a headache. He thought to himself, Grom, have you misunderstood something? I've always been faithful and I've always been this unscrupulous. What you saw before, what you believed, was just an illusion of an old man like you. Grom had already mentally prepared himself that Savis would fly into a rage when he saw the pool and flip the table. When that happened, he would have to teach this fellow a lesson. Grom knew very well that as a powerful Breaking Dawn arcanist, Savis did not have many chances to fight. It was very likely that there would only be one chance. Just as Lord Roar was ready to fight, something happened that made Lord Roar break down. Ah, this power. It's wonderful. Savis was like a starving wild dog that saw a steaming pile of shit when his stomach was rumbling. He almost pounced on it. Ignoring the rain, Savis leaned against the side of the pool, his palms pressed against the decorative porcelain, looking like he wanted to take off his clothes and jump in. How could Grom, who was ready to beat someone up, look at this? Master Ho's face was about to crumble. Duque's whisper of the wind reached Grom's ears unhurriedly. You don't understand the so-called High Elves' obsession with power. For the sake of magic, they've already turned the well of eternity blacker than coal. Therefore this color and this degree of evil are nothing. But is that even possible? Grom's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. If Savis was the only one acting like this, then it could be said that Savis and Duque were putting on a show together. However, the two elven arcanists who came with Savis also stretched their necks, looking as if they couldn't wait to rush over and see what was going on. They were very excited by that pool of black sesame paste. All right. You city people, oh, Pharaoh really know how to have fun. Anyway, we who play with axes don't understand. Grom was finally convinced. Duque wasn't bluffing. At that moment, in Azhara City, hundreds of kilometers away, the storm had caused the dark lake water in the Well of Eternity to become turbulent, as if it was surging. In the distance, it set off a huge wave that almost covered the Azhara Palace. The black waves roared and slapped each other in the air, bursting with arcane energy. In the sky, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as if 1,000 violent dragons were charging from the shore. As someone who had just teleported from the palace and witnessed the violence of the Well of Eternity and the calm of the pool of evil energy, Savis still cheered. This energy is so stable. Yes, this was Duque's vomit, and the best part had been converted by Duque. But no matter how many impurities there were, it was still the purest dark energy in the twisted nether. The concentration of magic was not at the same level as the Well of Eternity. But unlike the high-purity magic well water in the Well of Eternity that could not be used directly, Duque's inferior dark energy could be easily absorbed by living beings. It was because he could see this at a glance, and with Duque using the Burning Legion's name to swindle people, that Pharaoh, who was of a high level like Savis, did not doubt him at all. Duque was cold and arrogant, and his "I'm your boss" aura instantly dominated the scene. Purification is such a simple thing, and you want me, the Grand Lord of the Burning Legion, to do it? Not to mention these pollutants, even if Duque pooped a pile of sh*t, Savis would probably eat it. He had that pride. You little night elves want to ride on my coattails, right? Now that the coattails are here, kneel and lick them. You want power, right? I gave it to you, but what about your sincerity? Duque did not say a word, but his eyes and his aura said so. Duque's eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. Savis, know your place. If you don't satisfy me, don't blame me for starting a massacre. Savis shuddered. The carrot and the stick always arrived at the same time. Since the Grand Lord of the Burning Legion had fulfilled his promise, it was obviously time to pay the bill. Savis, this bastard who cheated his dream lover, his country and his compatriots, decisively sold himself and his resources. Lord Mark Dooku, my direct subordinates and I are willing to offer our souls to the army. I will also bring Her Majesty Queen Azhara here to pay her respects to you within today. Savis's words were resolute and sonorous. Selling souls and lives just like that. Grom, who was watching from the side, felt his teeth ache when he saw this heroic and righteous act. At this moment, Grom finally had the most direct and deep understanding of how crazy the ancient night elf mages were when it came to pursuing power. Duque did not even lift his eyelids. He snorted in disdain and pointed at the black sesame paste on the floor in front of him. Even in the eyes of the beastmen who did not like cleanliness, that place was filthy and smelly. Savi's, on the other hand, was like a dog chasing a bone. He crawled over respectfully and prostrated on the black mud and rainwater, his forehead touching the ground. "My lord, please grant me power." It was not just him. Even the radiant moon elven wizard who came with him knelt on the ground. Duque's lips parted slightly. "Dark energy is powerful. Dark energy is also great. It is the noble power that the great commander Sardras bestowed upon the chosen races that transcend the mortal world. Weak trash has no right to receive dark energy." As Duque's voice grew louder and louder like thunder, an IMAX screen appeared behind Duque. It was a huge illusory screen that was 15 meters tall. "Look up. Look at the fate of those inferior races." The faces of the 3 elves who looked up were twitching. This was because in the image over 20 creatures of different races had exploded and died. But the one who succeeded in the end showed an incomparably powerful increase in power. Duque was majestic and domineering. "Savis, let me ask you, are you willing to accept the baptism of dark energy under the flag of the Legion?" Chapter 10:10. Kiss. "You want to drink my foot wash water? Oh no, you want to believe in religion? If you don't believe in religion and don't want to die, then it will be very difficult for me to deal with you." This was Duque's subtext. On the side, when he saw Duque using threats and promises to coax a powerful die-hard fan of the Burning Legion, the righteous hero Grom Hellscream, he silently said in his heart, "Duque, you can do whatever you want, I can't bear to watch any longer. Call me if you're going to make a move." Raising his head slightly, Lord Howl looked at the gloomy and rainy sky. "Ah, the weather is so good today. I don't even have a place to count the ants." On the other side, Savis, who was immersed in the temptation of power, didn't notice the trap in Duque's words. "That's right. It's true that I let you join the Legion, but I didn't say whether the Legion was the Burning Legion or the Green Hat Pirates. Anyway, I am now the leader of the Burning Legion. If you are not convinced, you can go to President Savis and sue me. If you can see through my true identity and prove that this young master harbors ill intentions." As a result, of course, Savis believed in Duque's evil. It was like saying that classic sentence to the other half in a cathedral full of yin-yang fishes and blessings of Ami tofu. Savis said with sincerity and fanaticism, "I am willing." Grom, who was next to him, suddenly felt very lucky that he didn't drink too much water at lunch, otherwise he would have laughed out loud on the spot. He really didn't understand why Savis chose to believe in Duque's evil even though he knew that it was extremely risky and that he could easily lose his life. Grom wanted to ask more questions than the sky. In the words of a transmigrator, he wanted to ask Savis, "Are you stupid?" In fact, Grom couldn't be blamed. As a beastman, he could never understand the desire of the high elves for power. At the same time, it was impossible for him to know how many modern scams Duque, a super transmigrator who had transmigrated twice, had seen in the Celestial Empire on Earth. This was actually a psychological bait. First of all, it was to grasp the psychological needs of the target. "You want power, right?" "I do." Then he would repeatedly use psychological hints to hint to Savis, such as, "Your chances of winning the 20 million lottery are definitely higher than your chances of earning 20 million with your own hands." After becoming a breaking dawn and being unable to advance even an inch, Savis, who had been anxious for who knew how many centuries, was naturally more impatient and prone to losing his rationality. What followed next was the results of the series of digging holes. Publicly, Duque had the endorsement of Kill Jaden, the big boss of the Burning Legion. With his 4 identities as the Neighborhood Committee, the Jarmite Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Homeland Security Bureau, he had helped Duque prove that his grandfather was his grandfather. From the very beginning he had beaten Sarvis into submission. Generally speaking, if any Burning Legion liege were to forcefully descend upon Azeroth, their combat power would be reduced by 80 to 90% by planet Azeroth's protection circle. However, Duque was an authentic Azeroth man. When Nosdormu threw Duque back to 10,000 years ago, how could he not know about the backdoor he had left behind? So, Duke had brought back almost all the power he had obtained from the twisting nether. Duke, in his strongest shadow priest form that no one had ever seen in 10,000 years, had descended after being filled with dark energy. As soon as he descended, he beat up almost all the mortal powerhouses, completely shocking Savis and the other clowns. In the end, even if Sarvis was as cunning as a ghost, he had no choice but to jump into the fire pit. Duque did not even lift his eyelids as he said in a deep voice, "Offer your soul to the Legion." Duque drew a line with his finger, and an illusory soul scale appeared in front of Sarvis. It was a scale in the style of the Burning Legion. The base was an imitation of the old Kill Jaden's demonic hand, and then the two ends of the scale. One end was naturally left for Sarvis, and the other end was a glassware, which contained a ball of flickering yellow-green light of dark energy. Anyone could tell at a glance that this ball of dark energy was pure and powerful. It was hundreds of times better than the pool of mushy seeds in front of them. This was a special offering. Sarvis suddenly came to a realization. The more souls he offered, the more loyal it represented and the more power he could obtain. It was very fair. There was nothing wrong with it. At first he had only intended to offer 20% as a token of goodwill. But as things progressed, he felt that it would be embarrassing to offer less than 30%. Now it seemed that less than 40% was not appropriate at all. Of course, 50% was impossible. Anyone who cut off 50% of their soul would no longer be themselves, but just a walking corpse with a broken soul. So no matter how reluctant and bitter he was, Sarvis gritted his teeth and sent a thought to the empty end of the scale that he was willing to offer 40% of his soul. Sarvis. In order to prove my loyalty to the Burning Legion, I am willing to offer 40% of my soul to the Legion's emissary, Lord Infernal Emissary. After saying that, Sarvis seemed to have lost all his strength. Well said. With a smile on his face, Duque suddenly appeared out of thin air. With a demon's head as the blade, a soul dagger gleaming with dark energy suddenly appeared, and slowly cut down towards Sarvis. After Sarvis let out a scream, his body twitched and a few seconds later he slumped to the ground as if dead. When did Duque learn to cut souls? Please, this was a necessary self-cultivation for the Burning Legion's leader, okay? If he wanted to mingle in the Burning Legion, he had to learn how to capture other people's souls, and he still had the cheek to call himself a leader? Before Duque left, he had made a lot of promises to exchange for this essential leader skill from the Eridar Gemini. Of course, after the analysis of the system genie, Duque had secretly cancelled the trick left behind by the Gemini. Cutting souls was a technical job. Forcibly taking out the other party's soul from the body was very difficult, and the prerequisite was that your soul's strength far surpassed the other party's. And it was strenuous and unrewarding, because forcibly cutting the other party's soul would also consume one's own soul power. But it was different if the other party offered it willingly. It was even easier than using a knife to cut butter. As long as this soul was in Duque's hands in the future, as long as Duque squeezed it, Sarvis's soul would not collapse, and his soul would be destroyed, but his strength would be greatly reduced and he would become useless. Since Sarvis had jumped into the pit, Duque naturally accepted it with a smile. Using the newly learned method, after solidifying Sarvis's soul, he sealed it in a special soul container and put it away. Duque smiled. On behalf of Lord Sargeras, I bestow upon you, Sarvis's power. A green light of evil energy flicked out of his fingertip and flew to Sarvis's head, forming a green hat, crown, which was placed firmly on Sarvis's head. Chapter 10-11. Sarvis could clearly feel that the shackles that had bound him for countless years were beginning to be unlocked under the push of this brand new power. All over his body, the 100,000 pores were seeped into by this powerful and surging power. It brutally rushed into his body, entered his magic circuit, and with an unparalleled will, occupied every corner of his body. It was like a conqueror branding every organ and every cell with dark powers. From the dimmest 6th grade star it began to soar. 5th grade star, 4th grade star, 3rd grade star. The breaking dawn magic power that had not increased for many years had actually increased by 3 grades in one go. Sarvis could not help but tremble with excitement. Haha. Power. Is this the taste of power? Sarvis straightened up and looked at his slender fingers that seemed to have grown sharp claws, but he did not care. Instead, his face was full of ecstasy and excitement. However, all of a sudden, the power that seemed to be expanding endlessly in his body came to an abrupt stop. This made Savis suddenly fall from the clouds of happiness to the ground. He looked at Duque with a face full of surprise. He did not know what was going on. Although it was good, why was it different from what he had imagined? There was a strange and mysterious smile in Duque's smile. The army never raises trash. To measure the value of an existence, one is to look at his loyalty, and the other is to look at his actions. Go. Push for the opening of the portal to welcome the army into Azeroth. The day the portal opens will be the day you get the power you dream of. Savi suddenly came to a realization. That's right. Loyalty was important. But ability was also the key. Those who had loyalty but no ability were useless trash. Not to mention the army, even he did not like those incompetent subordinates. There was nothing wrong with the scheming of an emperor. He still remembered that when he was communicating with the void, Savis in the spiritual world stood in front of a blazing sphere, looking at the crack in the middle with full attention. In the depths of the sphere, the eyes of God were also looking at him. I heard your pleas. And knowing your dream. The impurities and imperfections in the world should be eliminated. I will give you what you desire. You are my loyal servant. The entrance is not open yet. It needs to be strengthened, because it needs to be big enough for me to enter. Those were the exact words of God. Savis nodded to Duque, indicating that he understood the request of God, conveyed by Duque. The teleportation door made by the night elves using normal methods could not accommodate a god. As long as he squeezed in, the door would probably shatter into pieces. They had to enlarge and widen the door so that it could stay open forever. This was God's ultimate test for him. The great Lord Mark Dooku. My following request is not necessary, but if what? If there is more evidence, it will speed up the process of pushing Her Majesty Queen Azhara towards the army. After pondering for 2 seconds, Savis finally said, I hope the army can send some powerful servants to serve the Empress. If possible, try to look as beautiful as possible. Duque smiled. The great God will always satisfy the reasonable requests of his servants. In the afternoon, the forbidden palace of Azhara was silent. As the child of the stars, Kador usually slept during the day to avoid being hurt by the rough and hot sunlight. So the Empress was sleeping. As the Empress, Azhara had the right to rest as much as she wanted. In short, she had to be perfect in all aspects, especially when it came to her beauty. Therefore, Azhara did not have a good impression of the servant who came in quietly. The servant quickly knelt on both knees in the Empress room. The young Empress got off the bed and was faintly visible behind the thin curtains. Your Majesty, please forgive me, but the chief advisor wants to tell you something. He said he brought something that you are interested in. Azhara could not think of anything that could interest her and make her leave her comfortable bed immediately. Even if the one who made this request was her most trusted Savis. Her long silver hair was draped over the pillow. She pursed her lips but still waved. Let him wait for 5 minutes. The Empress looked angry, but she had already stood up gracefully. Looking at herself in the mirror, still charming, Azhara smiled. Perhaps her cute chief advisor thought he had already controlled his master. But as the most beautiful Empress, she had the absolute confidence that she could control any man. Let him come in 10 minutes. She stretched her body gracefully and reclined on a chaise longue, one arm behind her head. 2 servants in silk clothes knelt beside her and gently fanned themselves. Seeing Savis enter quickly, Azhara slightly adjusted her posture so that the contours of her most seductive body could match the light and be displayed in the most perfect way. The Empress would always speak in the most melodious and moving voice. My dear Savis, since you want to see me at this time, you must have something very important to tell me. The Empress' hand seemed intentional but also seemed unintentional. It gently slid over her smooth thighs, making the curves of her body even more exquisite and curvaceous. Please forgive me for taking some time so that I can adjust to my best state to see you. Looking at Savis, whose throat made a swallowing motion, the Empress' smile became even more charming. Savi's heart tightened. He went forward and knelt on one knee. Staring at the white marble floor, he replied, Source of all light, the most beautiful existence in the world, thank you for giving me this opportunity to see you. I am very bold to disturb you, but I have brought you a very interesting gift. This gift is truly worthy of you, the queen of the night elves, the ruler of the world. Can I summon them up? He glanced at her and found that these words had definitely attracted the Empress' attention. The Empress' eyes showed increasing curiosity and desire through the veil. Azhara was no longer in a lazy posture. Instead, she sat up and leaned against the back of the chaise longue. Her limbs were slightly tense because of nervousness. You have whetted my appetite, my dear Savis. I permit you to present the gift. The counselor stood up, turned around and snapped his fingers toward the door. There was never a lack of guards when it came to presenting gifts. Surrounded by guards, Queen Azhara's breathing suddenly quickened, and then her face flushed with excitement. There were 4 incomparably tall demon guards and 12 elf maids wearing only underwear and cicada-thin gauze draped over their shoulders. If the wildness of the demon guards could satisfy the Empress' sense of security. However, the powerful magical waves emanating from the maids with mysterious glowing patterns on their bodies deeply attracted the queen's attention. Chapter 10-12. On this day, almost all the nobles of the Night Elves learned of a piece of news. Queen Azhara left her chambers in the middle of the night to secretly visit a special person near Galhala. Although it was said to be a secret, in reality hundreds of moon guards who practiced both magic and martial arts passed through the streets and alleys. There was no April Fool's Day for the Night Elves. Almost all the important Night Elves doubted their ears. Queen Azhara left her residence. In order to maintain her top-notch appearance, she almost never went out. No, she rarely even left her own palace, not to mention Azhara City. Now that the queen had left the city, this night was destined to be different. This news was so explosive that even the news of magical green humanoid monsters appearing near Surlama was easily overshadowed. A rainy night. The night elves loved to go out at night, but the wet weather made Queen Azhara a little unhappy. But the little unhappiness in her heart was all driven away by the huge blue-skinned existences surrounding her carriage. Ah, they are so strong. The queen's eyes were strangely blurred. Like a lighthouse in the night, the luxurious golden carriage could attract the attention of others from afar. 12 terrifying blue-skinned warriors were like a moving wall, lined up beside the queen's carriage. Because they were too tall, they could only lower their bodies and bend their waists to pass through the roads that could be easily passed by carriages. This was to prevent the horns on their heads from damaging the beautiful arcades or archways that were characteristic of the night elves. They understood human nature so well and were so obedient. Looking at their huge shields and extremely violent and beautiful maces and axes, Queen Azhara was completely entranced. She still remembered half a day ago when she asked Savis, "What are they?" Savis's answer: "They are your most loyal guards, my Empress. Protecting your life is their responsibility, and the only reason for their existence." Although 12 Heaven Realm warriors was a little, Savis promised that there would be more and more Heaven Realm warriors sent by God in the future. But these 12 were the first batch and they were all sent for the queen. Azhara, who was deep in thought, stretched her hand out of the carriage window. Like a child who had just touched a new toy, her fingers lightly touched the bronze armor of a demon guard, making a hissing sound. The demon guard glanced at the queen and turned his head back expressionlessly. These powerful otherworld guards were very important, but Queen Azhara felt that the 12 maids were the key. She knew very well what the criteria for choosing a maid was. Night elves were born good at martial arts, swordsmanship or archery, but there were still too few who were born with magic circuits. Those who were talented in magic had long been selected to become wizards. Elites who cultivated both magic and martial arts would be absorbed into the Moon Guards, which directly belonged to the queen. These 12 maids were obviously the kind that didn't have much talent. However, through the divine might of the Lord that Savis mentioned, he could actually directly engrave magic circuits on the maidservants' bodies, allowing the maidservants to have magic circuits from nothing and become low-level magicians. Her most loyal captain of the Moon Guards had told her that the 12 maids were all earth mages. This was truly an epic-making revolution. Everyone knew that the high elves were crazy about magic. However, the worst part was that only a small group of elves could master magic. Even the union of 2 pure-blooded high elf magicians had a chance of giving birth to a child that didn't know magic. This was something that Queen Azhara, who was crazy about using magic to rule the world, could not tolerate. It was obvious that this emissary sent by the god, in her heart had presented her with a brand new technology that had broken the seemingly absolute barrier between mortals and mystics. This was the biggest reason why Queen Azhara did not hesitate to condescend, to personally visit. As long as I have this, I can suppress those old fogies in Surlama in one go. The queen then retracted her gaze, and a strange yet happy expression appeared on her perfect face. It seems that I have to make up my mind. At the same time, in the royal villa where the dirty moon well was located, there was not a single night elf within a 100-meter radius. Duque was like a child playing with graffiti, doodling the dark energy that was so precious to the high elves. Seeing Duque messing around with the dark energy that had once tortured the orcs to the brink of madness, Grom sighed. Duque suddenly spoke in orc language. Do you know the history of Azeroth? Grom shook his head. I've never had the time. When the orcs came to Azeroth, they were initially conquerors, and when they failed they became survivors. As if he had thought of something, Grom added, according to my rough understanding, the Burning Legion was defeated in this ancient war, right? That's right. It was supposed to be like that, but it seems that someone wanted to change the ending. That's why Nozdormu sent us here. Our mission is to ensure that this part of history does not change, right? Grom bared his teeth. Duque did not answer directly and instead said, if nothing unexpected happened, would you be willing to run back to 10,000 years in the future? Be willing? The answer was obviously no. If Grom was still that arrogant orc and his mind was filled with the idea of orcs beating all other races, then it would not have mattered. But after witnessing the Burning Legion's massive fleet in the Twisted Nether, and witnessing the massive demonic army that devoured and destroyed countless planets, Grom could not help but have a thought that would make a hero like him shudder. If he did not do something, even if the demons that descended on the world of Azeroth were only left with 1/100th of their power, the Burning Legion could just use their lives to fill the gap, and all life on Azeroth would die. Grom's tone was as firm as nails as he enunciated each word. Heart. Then let us play it big. A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Right. Not long after, the sound of quick and light footsteps surrounded the entire royal villa. The strong and magical moon wardens quickly occupied all the important positions in the mansion. After knocking lightly on the door and getting Duque's permission to enter, Savis entered and nodded at Duque and Grom. Savis straightened his clothes and chanted, Light of the eternal night, the most beautiful and powerful existence in the world, Her Majesty Azhara of the Kaldorii Empire has arrived. Chapter 10:13. Any ruler would like to put gold on their faces. That was acting cool. He was nervous when Savis announced. If Duque, God's emissary, was displeased, he would be in trouble. Luckily, Duque did not react. Queen Azhara entered the room with her guards and maids surrounding her. She walked like the wind and was full of confidence. She did not make any sound and was even quieter than a cat's footsteps. The moment she entered, she noticed that Duque definitely lacked respect for her. If it was another existence, she might not be happy, but this subtle cold attitude just happened to prove that Duque came from the side of God. If he was God's emissary that surpassed all power in the mortal world, there would be no direct conflict with her imperial power. Queen Azhara understood her position very well. She gently lifted the hem of her gorgeous dress and bowed elegantly to Duque. May I ask if you are God's emissary, Lord Mark Dooku? This sweet voice made countless high elves fall head over heels. Indeed, the scene when she walked in with a smile was so perfect that it was breathtaking. Even Savi's eyes widened. She was the glory of the night elves. Every time she breathed, everyone held their breath and listened to her orders. From the expressions on the moon guards' faces, if they could please her, they would even be willing to go out and fight against dragons or even opponents stronger than dragons. Even though they knew they would die, they did not hesitate. Grom's eyes widened. As a beastman, he had a different sense of beauty compared to humans and elves. But he was still afraid. Who was Duque? A perverted fellow who had taken care of the 3 Windrunner sisters, including Queen Servanas of Sindorii. Others might not know Duque's character, but Grom definitely knew. After all, he had fought with the 3 Windrunner sisters on the battlefield. Duque was an elf lover. Even though the beastman's understanding was slightly different, it was more or less the same. At this moment, Grom was really afraid that Duque would not be able to control himself and ruin his grand plan. However, Duque didn't react at all. That's right, Queen Azhara was indeed a great beauty. Her skin was as smooth as silk and her long silver hair was scattered on her shoulders. The ends of her hair were slightly curled. The clothes she wore matched the color of her eyes, which was a graceful and luxurious silver color. But what kind of normal human would be attracted to a dark purple-skinned female night elf? Moreover, the Empress was considered very tall among female night elves, even taller than many male night elves. Only Savi's was better than her. Duque took a look and really wanted to shout, "Oh my god! I'm not Yao Ming, I can't handle this height." Most people looked at models with appreciation, but not every man had the height to match a model. Duque was by no means short among humans. Unfortunately, he was nothing in front of Queen Azhara, who was 10 meters tall. If someone asked Duque why he didn't like Queen Azhara, then Duque would definitely reply, "Sorry. I don't like the feeling of climbing trees." Well, since Duque was immune to Queen Azhara's most powerful legendary weapon, beauty, then the next step was business. Facing Queen Azhara's question, the super cool best actor Duque slowly stood up from the chair, and a terrifying dark aura bloomed from his body. Then he slowly raised his right hand. Queen Azhara gently waved her hand to stop the nervous moon guards. At such a close distance she could clearly feel the powerful, surging ocean-like magic power on Duque's body. However, she was good at manipulating people's hearts, so she didn't feel any killing intent from Duque, nor did she feel any signs that he was going to harm her. Then Azhara saw a ring on Duque's right little finger that emitted a terrifying aura of destruction. On the ring was the head of a two-horned demon that seemed to be burning with flames. The exquisite craftsmanship made the head look like it was alive. What she saw was not a small head on a ring, but a giant that was so huge that it could support the heavens and the earth, a flame giant that was bathed in flames. "High Elf Azhara. Kiss this ring with the head of my lord Sargeras. Show me your sincerity." Duke's voice was majestic, but it also had a kind of ethereal feeling. It was like the sound of a morning bell from a tall building in the distance, and it had a kind of penetrating power that could shock people's hearts. Not to mention the moon guards. Even Sarvis and Azhara firmly believed that this ring that emitted a huge wave of evil power was a holy item that the Lord of the Burning Legion had bestowed upon Duque. Only Grom was dumbfounded. Anyone would think that Duque was Sargeras' most trusted High Lord, envoy and favorite subject. Only Grom knew that Duque had never seen Sargeras before. Not only that, but this high-class magic ring was something that Duke had casually carved early in the morning. That bastard Duque still had the nerve to ask Grom for a few sweet potatoes from the maidservants to practice. Grom had thought that Duque's clumsy carving wouldn't be able to fool even the orcs. Who knew that Duque's improvement was actually at the speed of light. He'd found a gemstone of unknown material and completed it in less than 10 minutes before the queen arrived. He'd carved Sargeras' statue and infused it with high-purity evil power. Everyone else believed that Duque was loyal to the Burning Legion, but Grom was the first to not believe it. While it seemed that the High Elves had been fooled, Grom suddenly thought that he understood how Duke had managed to unite the scattered kingdoms of the High Elves as he looked at the dumbfounded High Elves. Logically speaking, Duque was so arrogant that he didn't even call Azhara by her title. Instead, he called her High Elf Azhara. That was very rude. But the High Elves who were crazy about power liked it this way. As expected, the envoy sent by God was a fortress. Even a pile of God's *T smelled good. After Duque had pulled in the demon guards and displayed the era-transcending technique of carving evil power circuits in the human body, as well as the powerful magic waves, they were dead set on believing that Duque would bring them what they'd always been seeking. Power that transcended the mortal world. With Queen Azhara at the front and Sarvis right behind her, more than 100 high elves in the hall knelt on one knee and chanted the name of Sargeras' God. Chapter 10:14. That's right, Azhara was taller than Duque. After kneeling and lowering her noble head, she was just a lowly existence compared to Duque. A pair of soft hands carefully held Duque's hand as if he was holding a holy relic. Queen Azhara slowly moved her beautiful face closer to Duque's fingers, and slightly opened her purple lips that looked like they were painted with lip gloss. The lips that countless high elves dreamed of gently kissed the ring on Duque's finger. Ah, a lingering moan could easily make a man think of some adult toys. Her eyes were blurry, her face was flushed, and that terrible ending sound made almost all the night elves look up secretly, but only Azhara was enjoying herself. Oh, this power! This sweetness! High purity and low concentration of dark power flowed down her lips and down her throat. The warm feeling quickly spread from her stomach to every inch of her blood vessels and into every cell. Azhara could clearly feel her body rejoicing, excited and ecstatic at the injection of this new power. Queen Azhara finally confirmed that this was indeed the power of a god, the most perfect power given to the high elves by the heavens. Even though she longed for more dark power, Queen Azhara was a very sensible woman. She took a step back and knelt in front of Duque. I, Azhara, feel the power of a god. My lord's messenger, great Lord Dooku. Please read the will of God. The queen knelt in front of him, her beautiful silver hair draped over her bare shoulders. Her gorgeous dress spread out on the ground made Azhara look like a blooming violet. If it wasn't for the fact that the queen did not conform to human aesthetics, perhaps this would be a very erotic scene. Since it had nothing to do with hobbies, then of course it was official business. Duque calmly retracted his hand and said in a clear voice, "The will of Lord Sargeras is for you to offer up the Well of Eternity as a reward for your promotion. You will be granted great dark energy and true immortality. As for the first step, I hope that you can quickly build a giant teleportation gate that is big enough for my lord and the Burning Legion to pass through. Do you have any objections?" Azhara frowned and said with some difficulty, "The High Elves have no objections, but there are many Night Elves who reject arcane magic. They believed in the moon goddess, Ilun, and the way of nature. I think they will firmly reject the Lord's arrival." Duque sneered. "Then why can't we find a way to prevent the outside world from interfering with our plan to build the portal? This will make things much easier for you in the future." Savis, who was kneeling at the side, raised his head and opened his mouth as if he wanted to explain. The natural division within the Night Elves was very difficult to unify. But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he realized that there was nothing he could say. If it could be done easily, they would have done it long ago. Azhara was a little confused about Duque's words at first, until Duque added another sentence. "I mean to forever avoid interference from within." This time both Azhara and Savis understood. Their faces turned pale in an instant. Duque was hinting that if negotiations and political means could not solve the problem, then they should prepare for war. "Azhara, you are a queen." Duque commented on Azhara as if she was a passerby who had nothing to do with him. His deep black eyes gazed into her golden eyes, and his gaze gradually became stern. "But if a queen can't even control her own subjects, then it means that she is not worthy of the crown on her head. I think you understand what I mean. Of course, my lord hopes that there was only one Azhara in the past and in the future." Duque's words were quite artistic and very sharp. The queen and Savis left in a daze. They saw hope and a way to obtain new power, but they were also forced into a dead end. Either they raised their butcher's knife against those nature elves who were unwilling to submit, or they offended the extremely powerful god that they worshipped very much. He could either raise his butcher's knife against the nature elves who were unwilling to submit, or offend the god that he worshipped and possessed immeasurable power. Worst of all, Duke had only given them 3 days to think it over. Almost as soon as the Night Elves left, Grom looked at Duque with a toothache. Almost as soon as the Night Elves left, Grom looked at Duke with a toothache. "Why are you looking at me?" Grom asked. "Did you forget that I told you about the original direction of this history?" That's right, Duque had indeed confessed this part of history to Grom. Lord Roar also knew that it was Queen Azhara who had sided with Sargeras that led to the famous ancient war in the world of Azeroth. Even though he knew this was the case, Lord Roar still felt his balls ache. At the thought of Duque seriously luring others to kill their own kind, and possibly succeeding, Grom felt a pang in his heart. If Duque used similar methods against the tribe in the future, would the tribe be able to withstand Duque's schemes? No matter how he looked at it, after being cursed by Arkharon and undergoing the dark power baptism, Duque seemed to have a lot more evil tricks up his sleeves. Grom struggled for a while but still asked. If he did not ask, he was afraid that he would go crazy. "Aren't you afraid that Queen Azhara will suddenly attack and really destroy the Night Elves that originally belonged to the victor's side? Or are you going to secretly inform the Night Elves when the Queen makes her move?" Duque wagged his right index finger proudly, and then handed Grom a list written in Cador. This is a list of the moon guardians provided by Savis. According to Savis, these are the strongest who are absolutely loyal to the queen in both magic and martial arts. If I am willing to use dark power to strengthen them, please choose from these elves first. Grom gritted his teeth for a long time. I don't know Elven language. No. I just want to tell you that I saw a very interesting name in this list. Duque pointed at a name. This name is Illidan's Stormrage. Illidan. Grom did not react to the name at first. After all, he was not a true transmigrator. After all, they had just fought the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Even if Grom did not want to care about the Night Elves, he at least remembered who had fought alongside him on the Night Elf side. Grom's heart suddenly tightened. He suddenly understood. Duque's smile was incomparably pure. Yes, pure as a fox. Illidan's brother is called Malfurion. At this point in time, the woman they are madly pursuing is Tyrande Whisperwind. Chapter 10:15. Grom definitely wouldn't recognize the Night Elves, but Tyrande had just worked with him. How could she not recognize him? Grom was speechless. Dude, that bastard. He even calculated this. If Queen Azhara wanted to attack the Nature faction, she wouldn't be able to bypass her most trusted and strongest subordinates, the Moon Guards. Unfortunately, the Moon Guards had the biggest traitor of the Nature faction, and one who had direct access to the higher-ups. It would be strange if the Queen faction could succeed. Grom really didn't want to ask where Tyrande and the Stormrage brothers were now. They shouldn't be low anyway. Grom's guess was right. Tyrande was already the leader of the Elune sisters at this point in time, and Malfurion had been studying under the demigod Cenarius for a long time. Once the two of them were alarmed, it would be like pulling out a radish with mud. Grom didn't give up. Is it good to cause chaos among the Night Elves now? Duque asked in return. Do you think the Night Elves will suffer heavy casualties from the ambush of their own kind, or from the ambush of the Burning Legion? Besides, Jaden will definitely send other strong people to open the portal apart from me. Since we have to ensure that the core of this history isn't changed, why don't we control the pace of things? Duque's words made sense. Lord Howl was speechless. In the past, Lord Howl only felt that Duque was scary, but he didn't know how scary. Only after working with Duque personally did he know that Duque's intellect surpassed all beastmen. He was thrown into the huge pit that was the Burning Legion, but Duque still hid his identity and became a great lord, using the Burning Legion's name to swindle others. What was even more ridiculous was that after swindling the first one he still came to eat the next one. Be it the Burning Legion or the Caldorii Empire, they were both existences that could easily crush him. But at this pace both of them were being toyed with by Duque. If not for the fact that Duque had always been a righteous hero of the Alliance and was willing to suffer a curse from Archimonde for Azeroth, Grom would have suspected that Duque was a natural schemer. In the meantime, while Duque was actively deceiving his superiors and bullying his subordinates, secretly stealing Cador's authority and seeping it into his personal goods, Azeroth's history was progressing as the original. Probably. Tyrande Whisperwind ended her evening prayers in the Moon Maiden Temple in Surma. Coming out of the prayer room, she slowly sat down on a chair and slightly stretched her body that was a little stiff from kneeling for a long time. There was one thing that had been bothering her for a long time. The relationship between Malfurion, Illidan, and her had changed over the years. They were no longer childhood playmates. The simplicity and happiness of childhood were no longer there. Instead, they were replaced by the complicated relationships of the adult world. Her feelings towards Malfurion and Illidan had also changed. She knew that their feelings for her must have changed. The competition between the two brothers had always been carried out in a friendly atmosphere, but as time went on, the competition became more and more obvious. She didn't like it. Now it had almost evolved into a fight between them as if it was for the sake of competition. Tyrande knew that the target of their competition was her. She was flattered. Deep in her heart, she felt that when it came to finding a life partner, one of them should be either Illidan or Malfurion. She didn't want anyone to be hurt. But she knew that if she chose one, it would mean hurting the other. If she chose neither, it would be the worst possible outcome. Both would be hurt. Tyrande forcefully pushed the worries out of her mind and prepared to leave. She wore a silver hooded robe and did not say a word as she hurried through the grand marble hall of the temple. Even when the other priests greeted her, she only smiled in return. She looked up at the roofless roof of the temple. Most of the prayer rooms were open air, and the moonlight shone down gently, like a mother caressing her favorite child. Tyrant passed by the faintly discernible carvings of the goddess, and finally crossed the marble floor of the porch and walked out of the temple. Outside, the cool night air made her feel more comfortable. Tyrant walked down the smooth white steps and joined the crowd. Many bowed their heads to welcome her. Others respectfully made way for her. That's right, to the people of Surlama, the priests of the moon goddess temple were the incarnations of the goddess. Even Tyrant herself was unconsciously deified by the people around her. Tyrant sighed softly and smiled at the people. But at this moment, Tyrant just wanted to return to a peaceful and simple life. Riding on the night saber, Tyrant's hair fluttered in the night wind. Tidying up her slightly messy hair, Tyrant allowed the night saber to lead her home while she fell into deep thought. It was the latest news. Her Majesty, who almost never left Azhara City, suddenly went to a royal villa in Garhala. It was rumored that the Empress did not hesitate to visit a mysterious guest for a brand new arcane energy. This was not a good sign. The highborn elves abusing the magic of the Well of Eternity could very well bring disaster. The topic of the Well of Eternity had always been a widely discussed topic in the Elune Sisterhood. The Queen's actions caused Tyrant and the other moon god priests to worry. At this moment, a loud commotion attracted Tyrant's attention. She noticed that there was a huge cage at the side of the central square of Surlama. A large group of night elves were pointing at the cage. What she saw was a huge, burly, green-skinned humanoid monster. From afar it looked a little like a troll, but upon closer inspection this obviously male monster was at least twice as burly as a troll. His bulging muscles were showing off his explosive strength. Illidan was there as well. He and a few moon guardians were pointing at the monster. "What's going on?" Tyrant asked Illidan. "I don't know. Our patrolling soldiers suddenly found this monster unconscious on the ground." When Tyrant tried to approach the green-skinned monster, Illidan grabbed her and said, "Be careful. The moment this guy woke up he almost killed a moon guard. That sword in his hand can easily cut through our armor." Tyrant noticed that one of the moon guardians next to Illidan was holding an extraordinary two-handed greatsword. It was a weapon that was completely different from the night elf style. Just as she focused on the greatsword, a voice came from the mouth of the violent green-skinned monster. "Your Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind." Chapter 10:16. Tyrant jumped in fright, but she was certain that the green-skinned creature had said her name in the terrible Kadoriai language. "You can speak Kador?" Not only Tyrant but even Illidan was shocked. He swore that before the green-skinned monster was escorted to Surlama, none of the elves had mentioned Tyrant's name in front of the green-skinned monster, let alone her full name. The green-skinned creature bared its fangs and mumbled some Kador syllables. It did not have the elegant and artistic tone of the elves, but it was still Kador. I am not good at it." The corner of Tyrant's eye twitched slightly and she turned her head. "Illidan, let him go." "But he wants." Illidan was obviously in a difficult position. "If you were in my shoes, what would you do if you woke up in a strange place and found an unknown being threatening your life with a weapon?" Tyrant countered. Illidan was speechless and could only do as he was told. However, when he opened the door of the cage, he secretly held onto an elven dagger with his left hand. He had absolute confidence in his skills. Even if he could not stop this strange green creature with his instantaneous magic, he was agile enough to send the dagger into the creature's throat. Tyrant had a gentle smile on her face. She walked over and crouched down, chanting Elun's name. The goddess of the moon answered her prayer almost immediately, and a gentle white light descended from the sky. "Praise Elun." The surrounding elves knelt in response to the miracle. The huge wound on the green giant's left arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Illidan sighed. Tyrant was too kind. For a monster of unknown race, she used a limited number of divine grace spells per day. However, this was also why he was so infatuated with Tyrant. Tyrant's lips moved slightly. "I apologize for the rudeness of my people. Please forgive their overreaction." After all, they suddenly found an outsider in our territory. May I ask, what is your name? Apologize. My name is Beal. Vex. The cat enemy. That's right, this green-skinned fellow who was miserably captured and almost sent to the animal park to increase the ticket revenue was the orc hero Brock, who was sent here by Nozdormu to maintain history and cause trouble 10,000 years ago. Brock, who didn't expect to be separated, was dumbfounded. Fortunately, it was different from the original history that Duque knew. In the original history, Brock was thrown there without realizing it. This time it was Nozdormu who had informed them beforehand. Thrall then hurriedly asked Duque to get a high elven mage to give Brock and Grum a language crash course. Sharpening a spear at the last moment, even if it's not bright, it's still bright. It had to be said that orcs really didn't have any talent for languages. Other than Orgrim and Thrall, most of the beastmen were rough and boorish. No wonder the orcs were born with -2 intelligence in most Dungeons and Dragons games. Tyrande and Illidan took good care of Brock and moved him to a night elf inn. Even though the two sides had great communication difficulties, after a difficult night of detailed discussion, Tyrande finally understood one thing. There were 5 emissaries who came with Brock to the Khador Empire. Their goal was to stop a calamity that was about to affect the entire Khador Empire, and even the entire planet Azeroth. Burning Legion? The literal translation of the name made Tyrande's heart palpitate. Thinking of Queen Azhara's abnormal actions, Tyrande suddenly had an ominous feeling that a storm was about to arrive. She felt that she seemed to have seen through the fog of fate and vaguely grasped the direction of events. Illidan, go back to the Moonguards first. If there's nothing important, don't contact me and Malfurion. Remember to keep your distance. Understood. Illidan suddenly felt a sense of eagerness. Tyrande rarely needed his help. It felt good to be trusted by Tyrande at a time when something big was likely to happen. Unfortunately, Tyrande's next words made Illidan a little unhappy. The moon has already started to set. I can't contact Goddess Elune for now. I'll go and discuss this with Malfurion. Illidan had a bitter taste in his mouth. As expected, compared to me, you trust my brother more? This was an indescribable envy, even jealousy. But Illidan did not say anything. He turned around and left. He had already made up his mind to keep a close eye on the Queen. He wanted to dig out the secrets that the Queen's faction had purposely hidden to prove to Tyrande that he was the heroic companion she wanted. The sky was just beginning to brighten when Tyrande received another unexpected piece of news. Malfurion personally came to find her, and the first thing he said was, 3 strange beings came to our forest and Cenarius took them in. 2 of them claim to be humans, and one of them speaks a strange elvish language that seems to be derived from Khador, but the words are obviously different. That's not important. They brought a message. Soon a terrifying demon army called the Burning Legion will descend upon Caldorii. Tyrande was shocked and her chest heaved up and down. This was the second time she had heard this name that night. She really wanted to treat this term as nonsense and expel it from her mind, but she couldn't do it. Let's go and meet those outsiders first, and then we need to reach an agreement with Cenarius and the others. One of the main reasons why Sir Lama could maintain a different political view from the Queen was that the natural faction had the support of Goddess Elune and a large number of demigods. Excluding Goddess Elune, who had not descended to the earth as an avatar. Including Cenarius, the Boar Agamagan, the Bear Brothers User and Usoc, the White Stag Malorn, the Storm Raven Averna, and the other immortals formed the ancient Guardian Formation, which was like a mountain blocking Queen Azhara's path. Just as Tyrande was startled and reacted. In Galhalla, Duque, who was allowed to have almost unlimited power, was performing a summoning ritual on the main vein of the Well of Eternity. Although Caldorii, who claimed to be a high elf, was considered the ancestor of magic under the Blue Dragon, Duque realized that the way Savis and the others used magic was so crude that it made people's hair stand on end. Chapter 10:17. Come to think of it, if there was an inexhaustible source of mana, then the priority would definitely be to create something grand and not to pursue efficiency. It was like a rich man with a net worth of tens of thousands of dollars for a meal. As a result, the habitual rough use of mana made many finer spells lose the opportunity to be developed. It was different in the future. The second Well of Eternity was made by Illidan after he stole a few bottles of pure Well of Eternity water and diluted it. The High Elf Sunwell was made by Dithrima after he stole Illidan's collection. It was an inferior third-generation product. Although the High Elves had always bragged about how awesome their Sunwell was, it might be true for humans without a mana source. But compared to the most primitive version of the Well of Eternity, it was as ridiculous as some Chinese daring to claim to have filled the entire Poyang Lake with a 330-milliliter bottle of mineral water. Since there was no way to provide an unlimited supply of mana, he could only work on techniques to make up for the lack of quantity. Didn't you see that the amazing Phoenix Flame magic circuit that should have been popularized had become the exclusive supply of the Sunstrider royal family? It was because the requirements for mana were too high that it couldn't be popularized. Because the High Elves had an inexhaustible power of the Well of Eternity, they neglected the various basics and the creation and optimization of magic circuits. As a result, once the mana that an individual could carry reached the upper limit, the strength of a mage would immediately peak. In turn, they would lose the various magic skills that should have been obtained through training. When Duque displayed extraordinary magic skills in front of Savis, what he received was, of course, a full house of applause. Duque drew a three-dimensional magic array with 7 floors. From bottom to top, there was a magic array on each floor. If one looked down from the sky and saw through it, they would find that it was 7 huge concentric circles. From a three-dimensional perspective, it looked like an inverted cone. When Duque finished drawing, the Cador Arcanists were already kneeling on the ground. Duque used the incomparably cool crystal pulse staff as a magic pen. After he finished drawing the array, he elegantly let the staff return to his portal bag. Okay. Activate the magic array. You can attract more messengers of the gods. Duque's look of "don't ask me to do such a heavy job" made him look pretentious. Only Grom at the side knew that Duque was now AF** king priest. He really couldn't do the job of summoning. At this moment, in the distorted void, Jaden's long right index finger was drawing circles on a huge moonstone with his sharp nails. Her nails, which were strong enough to break gold and jade, easily dug out a handful of green powder from the moonstone. The Eridar twins did not even dare to breathe loudly. They were familiar with Jaden's style, which meant that Jaden was getting impatient. He was a very generous master. At the same time, he was also an extremely harsh master. Benefits can be given and the amount can be negotiated. The premise is that you have to satisfy his seemingly bottomless and crazy demands. The Gemini knew very well that it was not Jaden's original plan to send a human lord into Azeroth. However, after a simple test, they found that the guy called Infernal seemed to be more suitable to break through planet Azeroth's defense array. That was why they sent him first. Now 2 days had passed and there was no reply at all. According to the previous agreement, they had to return to the distorted void as soon as they successfully logged in. Jaden suddenly said, 3 days. I'll wait until the 3rd day at most. If there's no reply, then you too will go. In the Burning Legion, most of the demons preferred to be rough and violent. When it came to sneaking in, this was the Eridar twins' specialty. But for the Gemini to go, it meant that Jaden had chosen the wrong person, which was a slap to his face. This would obviously cause Archimonde to start showing off again. At this moment, Alesis suddenly sensed something. Master. There's a response. It's infernal. He directly opened a high-level teleportation door with high stability. It can allow a mid-tier demon lord to enter Azeroth without any damage. Alesis' voice was slightly excited. Huh. A rare smile appeared on Jaden's face. There was a huge difference in difficulty between letting a demon lord of the same rank who was completely resisted by the planet's defense system descend and letting a mid-tier demon lord who had adapted to the world of Azeroth arrive without any damage. If it was stable, the difficulty would be 10 times higher. Jaden originally sent Duque to take the lead and only asked him to find a way to contact the army believers in Azeroth to see if he could build a relatively stable small teleportation door and teleport as many elite demon guards as possible over. He wanted to build a forward base in Azeroth and then consider expanding the teleportation door. Now that Duque had directly completed the task, the Eridar twins who were responsible for recommending Duque were also proud. Alesis stepped forward. It seems that our new lord is very capable. I didn't realize that Infernal's spatial magic level was so high. This has completely surpassed the standard of mortals in Azeroth. Queen Selaras smiled. He has already used his actions to prove his loyalty to the army. Master, do you think? On the surface, the twins were asking for a reward for Duque, but in reality weren't they asking for credit for themselves? Jaden also smiled. I hate trash the most. But I'm never stingy with rewards for my capable subordinates. He waved his huge demon hand and 3 boxes that emitted a mysterious purple glow appeared in front of the twins. Give the last one to Infernal. The twins giggled and accepted it. Elisa's asked, Master, who should we send as a mid-tier lord? Jaden smiled evilly. Didn't Archimonde always say that the second wave must be his subordinates? Then let Magtheridon go. In all fairness, Magtheridon was also a very powerful demon. If not for the fact that Duque had just dealt with Manaroth, the boss of the Abyss Lords, Magtheridon would definitely cause trouble for Duque. However, with that incident it was clear who was the leader and who was the second. They were both intermediate lords. In the end, in the Mage Tower of Galhalla, the high elves who kept chanting and pouring huge amounts of magic finally waited for the other oracle of their dreams. It was a giant demon with a lower body like a dragon and an upper body like a human. It was more than 30 meters long and 12 meters tall and wielded a double-headed heavy sword. Chapter 10:18. When this huge demon squeezed through the portal like toothpaste, Savis and the others were worried that the portal would not be able to withstand it and explode. In the end, the magic formation that Duque had drawn stood the test and allowed this huge demon to successfully descend. Unexpectedly, this huge demon that could make any Kadorii tremble knelt in front of the tiny Duque. I obey Lord Archeron's orders. Before the main force of the Burning Legion arrives, I, Magtheridon, will obey all your orders. In terms of size, he looked like a dragon swearing allegiance to a newborn deer instead of eating it. It was laughable, but no one dared to laugh. Duque's body glowed like a dark sun, constantly reminding the people around him of his terror and power. Duque's high status left the Kadorii speechless. Duque rubbed his eyebrows and said without holding back, Damn it. I want a warlock, an Eridar warlock who can help stabilize and open a larger portal. Why did Archaron send me an idiot who only knows how to charge and break through enemy lines? Magtheridon subconsciously wanted to flip out on the spot. But at that moment the Duque in front of him suddenly changed. It was not a change in Duque's power but in his aura. It was as if time had turned back and he had returned to his childhood, when he was watched by a group of fierce elders. It was a feeling of helplessness and terror. This terror was even greater than most of the Burning Legion's high-ranking lords. Magtheridon's dark green face immediately turned the color of pig liver. Anyone could see that he was sullen, but he did not dare to show it. Come to think of it, Duque had defeated his boss, Manaroth, in one move. If he really wanted to deal with him, half a move was enough. Feeling the surging dark power on Duque's body, Magtheridon, who had been slapped in the face on the spot, would do as he was told even if he had to break his long horn-like tusks and swallow them himself. He once again lowered his huge demon head. Apologies, Great Lord of the Spiders. It is Lord Archeron's will that assigned me here. If you have any opinions, you can report them to the Lord. I am only responsible for obeying your orders. The first half of the sentence pointed out that there was still a boss behind me, but the second half was obviously a sign of fear. Such a colossus that exuded a terrifying aura was acting like a little wife who had suffered domestic abuse, admitting her grandson in front of Duque. This scene was as strange as it could be. Savis secretly sucked in a breath of cold air, his reverence for Duque involuntarily increasing. Of course, Magtheridon was the main culprit in this large-scale teleportation, but the total number of teleportations wasn't just enough to teleport an intermediate lord. Since the defense circle of planet Azeroth had not been completely cracked, no one knew when the next teleportation would be. Therefore, it was necessary to send as many troops as possible. If the maximum number of teleportation this time was 100, then Magtheridon would have more than 80 points. The remaining points would still be enough to send a lot of elite demons. Groups of demon guards and apocalypse guards stepped out from the wide-open teleportation gate. Apart from them, there were also many Eridar succubi. They wore the most sexy and provocative clothes, or rather they wore shameful strips of cloth tied around their necks. The moment they appeared, they shamelessly winked at the high elf arcanists. From the old men to the arcanists who were obviously still young, they were all within their hunting range. Finally, nearly 1,000 demons knelt on one knee in front of Duque. According to Lord Kill Jaden's orders from this moment onwards, including me, Dog King Hacker, all 1024 demons will be under the command of Lord Kill Jaden. The one who spoke was a demon officer bathed in flames and lava. He had a head that looked like a dog's head. Dog King Hacker was not the evil god Hacker that the trolls worshipped. This Hacker could only be considered a more powerful mid-level demon commander, and his strength was weaker than a lord's. Duque kept an eye on him because this guy was trash in other aspects, but his special skills were rather interesting. Duque's gaze suddenly became sharp. His gaze, which was 10,000 times sharper than a sword, swept across the 1,000 demons from left to right. Then Duque suddenly attacked. A black whip as thick as a pillar swept across the battlefield in 1/100th of a second. The terrifying strengthened version of Mental Whip was temporarily applied to every demon. Without exception, all of the demons fell to the ground, twitching in pain. Amidst the cries of pain, a ferocious expression appeared on Duque's face. Perhaps you haven't heard of me before today, but that's not important. From now on, I'm sure everyone has a very deep understanding of me. Now isn't the time for you to wantonly kill and destroy. When the time comes, I'll let you have your own fun. But before that, you'd better tuck your tails between your legs. Whoever dares to spoil Lord Sargeras' plan, I'll distort the void and crush the souls of your idiots one by one without Lord Sargeras' help. Do you understand? Duque's final roar made the thousands of demons tremble. At this moment, Duque turned around and called Savis over. He pointed at Savis. Now, all demon guards and doomsday guards must listen to the command of this high elf, Savis. Even if he wants you to commit suicide, you must do it. Understood. Hundreds and thousands of demons knelt on one knee in unison to Savis. It could be seen that Savis's face was flushed with excitement that couldn't be concealed. Duque's eyes turned and looked at the enchanting succubi. As for you, do whatever Lord Kill Jaden tells you to do. But you, come here for a moment. Seeing Duque's face reveal an evil smile that all men understood. The Cadores Arcanists all revealed envious expressions. One reddish-brown, one purple, the two sexy succubi twisted their slender waists that would make single dogs drool. They wrapped their arms around Duque's waist seductively and followed Duque into the side hall. Almost as soon as the door closed, Duque heard a coquettish voice echoing in his ears. Great Lord, you really have good taste. You picked us sisters at once. Lord Infernal, may I ask what type of service you would like? Perhaps some people would ask if Duque had really joined Major's discipline and finally wouldn't let Eridar's hooves off? Of course not. Duque rubbed his nose. My lords, don't play with me. Just say what you want. Tisk. You saw through me? How boring. After two coquettish shouts, the two succubi revealed their true forms. Of course, they were the Eridar twins. Chapter 10:19. Sneaking into the enemy's rear, playing dirty and forcing women into prostitution, and letting every heavily defended fortress fall from the inside. This was the Eridar Gemini's forte. There was a poem that praised the Gemini. This body is a wretched wretch. Often thrown into the enemy's formation by the boss on a whim. Though in countless battlefields never once defeated. Never once tasted defeat. Never met a bosom friend. Often hugging each other on the peak of a burning mountain to have sex. Therefore he didn't know the meaning of this life. This body is destined to be born of wretches. Cough cough. This poem was of course made up by players. It was referring to the Gemini's situation in the army where they were not loved or cared for. Every time they could not break through the situation and had to take a roundabout route, they would force the Gemini, the demons who worked behind the enemy's formation, to step in. After successfully opening the door, they would rush into the planet to slaughter and destroy, and the Gemini would have nothing to do with it. It could not be helped. Most of the races in the Burning Legion were muscular men who advocated violence and destruction. They would only scream outside the defensive circle when there was a problem, and those who were willing to put their minds to work were the minority. And so they kicked the Eridar Gemini over. Duque was absolutely sure that there was no such scene in the original history. So the Gemini's goal was, of course, to keep an eye on this unreliable leader of the army. But before they could observe in the dark, Duque pretended to show his power and pulled them out. Even if they lowered their strength to pass through the magic circle, their mental strength would not be weakened much. Duque was using the enhanced mental lash, which had a large area of effect. How could a normal elite demon have the same mental strength as the Gemini? That was also the reason why the Gemini's anger was half real. But they were still considered gangsters. They had entered the battlefield to prevent Duque from stirring up trouble. In fact, when Duque had infused his dark energy connected with Queen Azhara and opened the portal in the eyes of the Burning Legion's higher-ups, the possibility of Duque betraying them was almost negligible. The Eridar twins were not angered by this. They immediately reverted to their true colors and started fawning over Duque, the newly promoted Great Lord with a bright future ahead of him. Aura's eyes were like silk, and her soft hands gently shook Duque's left hand. Hey, Infernal Affairs, Master Kil'jaeden is quite satisfied with your performance this time. Queen Sololas leaned directly on Duque's right shoulder. Since Master Duque is in a good mood, we've spent a lot of effort to get these things from Master for the sake of you making us sisters proud. With that said, Gemini waved her hand at the same time, and 3 treasure chests emitting powerful mana fluctuations appeared in front of Duque. The best actor Duque, of course, was instantly immersed in his role. Like a money grubber, oh no, like a starving dog, he pounced forward and opened the treasure chest, letting out a series of exclamations. The Eridar twins' faces were still frozen in awkwardness as their hands were suddenly emptied. This brat clearly did not like the Eridar demoness, seizing the opportunity to escape. But who were Gemini? A professional worker behind enemy lines. A professional, okay? In any case, Duque's crazed gaze towards equipment was not an act. Since she knew Duque's weakness, it was a small matter that she couldn't seduce Duque. Originally, Sir Kil'jaeden wanted us to pick 2 of them first, and the last one is for you. Aura's voice sounded at the right time. Queen Saloras continued. But seeing that you've just become a Void Lord and don't have much good equipment on you, Infernal Waters, I'm afraid that you're a new Void Lord. We sisters will reluctantly part with our treasures and give them to you first. The best actor Duke looked embarrassed. This is a piece of equipment that every lord yearns for, Aura said. Queen Salolas sighed. Hey, I really can't bear to. The Eridar twins echoed each other. It was so obvious, how could Duque not understand? If Duque chose to continue pretending to be stupid and try to get the equipment, they also had a backup plan to deal with Duque. Even though Duque was the leader of the Church of Immoral Principles, Duque's moral principles were as high as ever when it came to soul corruption. Duque immediately smiled and said, Infernal Water's position today is all thanks to the 2 Eridar sisters' guidance. If there's anything I can help with, please let me know. Although he said that, his hands did not relax at all. He grabbed the equipment in the 3 chests in his hands, clearly showing that he didn't want the equipment. He wouldn't give his life, everything else was negotiable. Seeing Duque acting like a miser, Gemini smiled like a flower and said, It's not an order. I just hope that Infernal Waters can provide as much detailed information as possible on the enemy so that we can work for Master Kil'jaeden. What Gemini wanted was never simple destruction and destruction. There were too many boorish people in the Burning Legion who relied on their muscles to make a living. No matter how good Gemini was at fighting, it was impossible for them to surpass vanguard generals like Manaroth, not to mention a big shot like Archimonde. They relied on information to become rich. Just as they reached this step, they were shocked. With many years of secret work experience, they could tell at a glance that Savi's, the general who had pushed for the Burning Legion to descend, was completely obedient to Duque's words. In addition to the various deductions, Duque had actually controlled almost all of the High Elves in a short 2 days. This was a good thing for the army, but to Gemini, it was tantamount to losing an important point of entry. If they wanted to obtain further information, they could not avoid Duque. Gemini very straightforwardly proposed an exchange of benefits to Duque. To their relief, Duque immediately agreed. No problem. But 2 days is too short. I have to prepare the summoning spell and collect information, so this information is definitely not complete. It is only a general idea, and a lot of it came from Savi's words. Duque took out a thick piece of parchment from his pocket. On it, there was a long list of names written in Eridar as well as the corresponding introductions. Gemini was overjoyed when she saw it. Written on it were names such as the Supreme Leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, and the Lord of Fort Raven, Ravencaze. Of course, there were also the names of some lords. For the Gemini who had just arrived, this was definitely no different than a beacon in the dark. Whether Duque was hiding anything or not, it could be said that it was easy to find out. Duque would also not fake this kind of thing. It was impossible for Gemini to know Duque's evil intentions. Admittedly, these guys who seemed to be very important were indeed the backbone of the Night Elves. But many of them in the original history were just bystanders. For example, just mention Latuzius. If this guy did not kneel, there would not be Illidan's position. The ingenuity of this was something that outsiders like the Eridar Gemini could not understand. Moreover, among Queen Azhara's political enemies, they were not the ones who made the most noise. Since they were all cannon fodder teammates in history, Duque really did not feel the pinch when he sold them. Chapter 10:20. Sending the information was just a basic exchange. This level of information was definitely not enough to exchange for Kill Jaden's treasures. Duque also sent dozens of gossip, one of which was, one of the important leaders of the Elune Sisterhood, Tyrant, was in a love triangle with the Stormrage brothers. As the first disciple of the demigod Cenarius, Malfurion Stormrage, who had a great influence in the Naturals, had the upper hand in this love competition. Illidan Stormrage, who had basically failed, joined the Moon Guard. For a demon who specialized in tricking people into falling, a single dog like Illidan who was frustrated in love was the best target. Only Duque knew how crazy Illidan's infatuation with Tyrande was. At this point, Duque had secretly buried a nail that could change the entire situation of the battle. The highlight was naturally at the end. Noticing that the Gemini were willing to reduce their strength from a standard lord to an elite demon, Duque enthusiastically recommended his new invention to the Gemini, a dark magic circuit system engraved on the surface of the skin. This method of increasing the magic circuit in a disguised form made Gemini's heart beat faster. Moreover, this was a magic circuit powered by dark energy. The Gemini really could not find a reason to refuse. But the Gemini was very careful. Just let Salo Ras inscribe the dark energy circuit. Both you and she are of the shadow attribute, so the amplification will be greater. The high-grade warlock Oresis who specialized in fire magic used a very legitimate reason to only let Salo Ras inscribe. I see. You guys can decide. With a calm and indifferent expression, Duque engraved a set of magic circuit inscriptions on Queen Salora's smooth back. The effect of Duque's personal work was so good that even Oresis was a little envious. Dark energy was a power that the Eridar clan had mastered to the point of perfection. It was true that the Eridar Gemini had exerted their strength, but as warlocks, their strongest point was not their bodies, but their dark magic circuits. Now that Duque had inscribed a set of circuits on Salo Ras, he could feel Salora's strength rising rapidly. This effect was not 1 + 1 = 2. At the very least, the effect was equivalent to 4. In just 3 hours, Salola's had reached the level of the Hound King hacker. Coupled with Salola's gorgeous shadow magic, she had the strength of a quasi-lord. For a moment, Aless almost wanted to ask Duque to carve a set for her. In a place where Duque couldn't see, Salola's gave her sister a look, suppressing Aura's impulsive heart. It was only at this moment that the 3 pieces of advanced epic equipment that Duque was finally safe. The headgear, Dark Spell Ring, Desecrator's Gauntlet, and Kill Jaden's Broken Cloak were the 3 top-notch cloth armor items at the current stage of the game. They instantly increased Duque's strength by at least 30%, making him almost as strong as a high-tier lord. Firstly, he did not dare to use the equipment he had obtained in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Secondly, although it was a priest's equipment, holy priests and shadow priests were 2 completely different positions. The divine priest is the nanny. The shadow priest was a powerful magic attack profession. Didn't you see that even the strongest defense warrior would have a set of crazy damage output equipment in their backpack? Duque had contributed so much to the world, there was nothing wrong with him having 2 sets of equipment. Eridar left with a satisfied look on her face. Duque stayed with a satisfied expression on his face. Time unknowingly came to the third day after returning to Azeroth. Duque was sleeping soundly when suddenly, without warning, a sharp dagger was pressed against Duque's neck. Evil fallen one. Accept the punishment of justice. It was an extremely cold female voice. Duque raised his eyelids. Damn it. I just pulled an all-nighter last night. Do you still want me to live? With that, Duque turned over and continued to sleep. The attacker froze for a full 3 seconds before sighing. My Duke Beast, you are still as shameless as ever. Now I believe that you are not fallen. That's right. Bypassing a number of demon guards, silently snuck up to Duque's side without being alerted by the system elf. Of course it was one of them. Vanessa, dressed in a thief's outfit, gradually revealed her figure in the air. Fallen? I was so close to being completely finished. However, I am now. Lord Infernal Emissary, the Great Lord of the Burning Legion? Such a tasteless name, I know it's you. Vanessa smiled as she put away the pair of deadly daggers that were enough to make any wizard tremble in fear. Bullshit. If you don't know it's me, then get out of the Marcus family. Duque poked his head out of the quilt. That won't do. The Van Cleef family has sworn loyalty to the Marcus family for generations to come. Do you have the heart to let a weak woman like me freeze to death in the snowy wilderness? That scoundrel Vanessa turned on her acting mode. Looking at the crocodile tears that had just been squeezed out with eye drops, Duque really wanted to slap this maid who specialized in angering her master to death. What the hell, a weak woman? You can almost dismantle a Gundam, no, dismantle a fell mecha with your bare hands. Why are you still pretending to be a weak woman? Bah. Duque snapped. Alright, make sure I'm fine. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then scram. Vanessa spread her palms. Give me the information and I'll scram immediately. Duque rolled his eyes, but still handed a small ball to Vanessa. Don't look for me if there's anything before the crucial moment, and even more so if there's nothing else. Understood. In the next moment, Duque, the powerful maid who had stepped into the realm of heroes, disappeared in the morning light. Looking at the sky outside the window that had finally become sunny, Duque pondered. The actors on the old stage are all here. May I ask, Goddess of Fate, what kind of surprise or scare will you bring me this time? Throughout the ages, those who could clearly grasp the veins of fate, let their vision transcend the mortal world and control the overall situation had always been rare. At this moment there were still countless people daydreaming. In the palace of Azhara City, Queen Azhara danced happily. Her graceful stains made the eyes of a group of maids stare. Vashti, am I beautiful? As the queen's personal maid, Vashti's face was filled with fanaticism. In this world, there will be no existence that can resist your majesty's charm. Is that so? That's great. Yes, that spy from yesterday must be pretending to be calm. Because he knows that his master, Sargeras, must be infatuated with me. In that case I will become his matriarch. Chapter 1021. Every being had the right to daydream, but only one in a million could turn a seemingly unreachable dream into reality. Duque didn't know how stupid Queen Azhara had to be so sure that she could make Sargeras fall head over heels for her. Anyway, he had no obligation to save these self-proclaimed nobles among the elves, nor did he plan to reverse this 10,000-year-old history. If things went awry, the Night Elves' hegemony on the continent would be permanent, and there would be nothing left for humans after 10,000 years. Then wouldn't the empire harem that Du had built up be ruined? Are you kidding me? Since the High Elves want to die, I won't stop them. Thus, Duque became the Great Void Lord of the Burning Legion with a peace of mind. However, in order to prevent himself from getting too into character and causing the Night Elves to fall, Duque still did his homework. Less than half an hour after Vanessa left Duque's side, Tyron received a magical image that made her tremble both physically and mentally. Under the summons of Savis and the other elven arcanists, a huge three-dimensional magic formation was activated. Hundreds and thousands of demon soldiers lined up neatly and walked out of the portal. Burly bodies, muscles full of violent beauty, sharp and hard fangs and claws. All of the above almost made Tyron faint. An unprecedented sense of danger filled her and Malfurion's hearts. Mr. Roddick, Miss Vanessa, please repeat what you know. This is very important. Ronan, who went by the alias Roddick, and Vanessa, who basically didn't appear in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Both appeared before Tyrant and Malfurion after putting on makeup. The Burning Legion's invasion is unavoidable. Most of the nobles in Kaldorii have already become the Burning Legion's minions. War is about to break out. I don't know the exact time of war, but I'm sure it's very near, Ronan said with absolute certainty. Malfurion, however, noticed another detail. This magical image is very magical and very stable. I can't imagine how they managed to bypass the detection of so many great arcanists and complete the recording. Miss Vanessa, can you explain? I won't hide it from you. Roddick's teacher, who is also my master, is currently in the enemy's formation and is in a high position. However, we are unable to fully trust you, nor can we tell you his current identity. Please forgive us. However, the authenticity of this information is extremely high, so please be prepared and stop fantasizing about Queen Azhara. Because she is one of the masterminds behind the Burning Legion. The two night elves clenched their fists. Even though Roland had long since known that the noble high elves were crazily obsessed with the arcane arts, attracting the most terrifying demon army in the universe in order to obtain even greater power was no different from self-destruction. I'm going to find Cenarius. Malfurion rose. I'll talk to Elune, then contact the various lords. Tyrant's face was ashen. At this time Luo Ning suddenly said, actually, one of our companions has already contacted the dragons. Dragon race. Tyrant exclaimed in shock. To the ancient night elves, the dragons were a race that was both very close and very distant. The dragons who guarded the world rarely interacted with other races. However, any intelligent race would know how powerful the dragons were. Yes. Luo Ning said solemnly. Impossible. As long as it was immortal, once they stepped into the dragon clan's territory, they would be burned to ashes. The dragon clan would not give anyone a chance to explain themselves. Call your companion back immediately. Malfurion said anxiously. Luo Ning shook his head. It's fine. My companion's identity is a little special. You will definitely succeed in convincing the dragons. Crassus was also a red dragon. As the saying went, don't talk to your own people. The dragon's breath would never land on Crassus. In any case, this was a little secret. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief. Tyrant said, if the dragons join us, we... Luo Ning interrupted her with the words, I'm going to win. No. Even if all the 5 colored dragons come together, they might not be able to defeat the Burning Legion. All we can do is avoid collapsing right from the start. As for the opportunity to win, we need to look for it seriously. Tyrant's faces paled. They couldn't help but raise their guard against this unknown Burning Legion. Tyrant spoke resolutely, we will prepare to the fullest extent possible for this war. Malfurion said, I'll have to trouble you to help with the rest. Luo Ning and Vanessa nodded at the same time. In fact, Luo Ning sighed too. He was also very helpless about this time's transmigration. On one hand, the information he had gathered was limited. Nozdormu had forbidden them from coming into contact with the Night Elves, saying that it might cause an irreversible change in history. This made it difficult for Luo Ning to follow the main storyline of the ancient war even if he wanted to. After all, as far as Luo Ning knew, only Tyrant and Malfurion were still alive after the ancient war. However, they were not allowed to come into contact with them. As for the ancient war, Luo Ning had flipped through the incomplete records and history books that the Dalajan had salvaged, but he could only find a bunch of vague fragments. He roughly knew that the Burning Legion had come once 10,000 years ago. Then the Earth aspect dragon, Neltharion, betrayed them and blew up the Well of Eternity for some unknown reason, destroying the ancient Kalimdor continent and sending the Burning Legion back to their homeland. As for how it became like this, he had no idea, nor could he verify it. Most of the information humans had about the ancient war came from the High Elves. In this period of history, there was naturally no lack of High Elves trying to flatter themselves. The only thing he could be sure of was that Anastrian Sunstrider's father, Dasrima, had participated in the war, and his role seemed to be a little dishonorable. He was completely at a loss for the rest. On the other hand, he felt that his master Duque knew a lot of information that he didn't, but Duque refused to say it no matter what. Now, the biggest trump card of the Azeroth Coalition army was undoubtedly Duque, who had become the Burning Legion's Void Lord. Looking at the backs of Tyrant and Malfurion leaving, Luo Ning sighed. With Master's character and intelligence, he probably won't stop until he makes the Burning Legion bleed. Vanessa shrugged her shoulders, looking as if she was about to die. I'm also very helpless to have such a master. Right, what should we do now? Chapter 1022. I'm going to learn from Master during the battle at the Dark Portal. I'll think of a way to print a batch of battle manuals and teach the Night Elves how to deal with demons. This will prevent them from taking the wrong path. Experience gained through blood and life was always a priceless treasure on the battlefield. This could change the balance of power on the battlefield. Vanessa suddenly asked, "What is Brock doing?" Ronan shrugged. After he regained his freedom, he was summoned to see Cenarius. It seems like the demigod is trying to strengthen his blade of cataclysm. Lucky guy. Right, how much time do we have? Master told me to go to Azhara at noon and midnight to keep an eye on Grom Hellscream. Before the city's defenses were strengthened, a hero-level thief like Vanessa could enter and leave Azhara easily. She immediately understood what it meant to keep an eye on Grom. At noon on the first day, Grom was playing with ivory carvings in the corner of the royal garden. He was carving on a steel boar's tooth, carving the head of a lord of the abyss on it. On the second day, Grom was playing with wood carvings, using an axe as a carving knife and carving out 2 lords. At midnight on the third day, Grom went to the toilet 3 times. Every day Grom would do something new. The intelligent Vanessa immediately understood what he was doing. Unbeknownst to most of the Night Elves, the dark clouds of war were rapidly accumulating. On the 6th day, Vanessa finally received new instructions. It wasn't until the 7th day that Tyrant finally received the most conclusive piece of information. Illidan, who had joined the Moon Guard, had snuck back and told Tyrant the terrifying truth that there were 5 Burning Legion lords in Azhara. Tyrant no longer hesitated and went straight to the Night Elves' respected Lord Ravencase. She showed Ravencase the evidence. Ravencase's face was ashen. He swung his strong arm in a circle and slammed his fist on the table. That traitor Savis must have deceived Her Majesty. No. I must encourage all the lords to start an operation to rescue the king. Tyrant was speechless. She could not help but admire Queen Azhara's charm. Even though there were images of the Empress appearing near the teleportation portal, and even footage of the Empress happily caressing those burly and ugly demon guards, there were still many lords like Ravencase who believed that the Empress had been deceived. 5 lords of Caldorii had the same idea as Ravencase. The only good thing was that at least they were ready for war. Just as the war was about to break out, something big happened in Azhara City. A huge commotion came from the outer city of Azhara. It was the resting place of Queen Azhara. She ordered music to be played in the hope of driving away the noise, but alas, the lyre and flute were of no use. She had no choice but to get up. Her new bodyguard, the Demon Guard, followed closely beside her. She strolled gracefully through the palace. The first person she saw was not Jarvis, but Varsun, the captain of her guards, who was on one knee with one fist on his chest. "I am the Supreme Empress. My dear captain, why is it so noisy outside?" The night elf with a face full of scars looked up at her and hid his expression. "Perhaps it will be easier to show it to you." "Very good." He led the way to a balcony overlooking the main city. Azhara rarely came to this balcony because she didn't want to be seen by the public. She preferred the view from the luxurious balcony in her room, which might allow her to see a corner of the Well of Eternity. With a snap of Varsun's fingers, a royal arcanist released a small, telescopic vision. Then the spiritual spell visual projection showed the queen that many civilians in the outer city were vomiting and having diarrhea. It was a terrible scene. The queen waved her hand, not wanting to continue watching. The mirror image disappeared instantly. "Your Majesty, it seems to be a plague." "How can there be a plague? Why didn't anyone report it to me?" The queen looked displeased. At this moment Savis hurried over. "Honorable Lord of Evernight, I may be able to explain." The queen raised her hand and gestured for Savis to continue. "According to your instructions, we are shutting down the magic branch of the Well of Eternity so that more magic power can be injected into the construction of the portal. When we shut down the magic branch of Count Ollie John Farrell's Mage Tower, it seemed to have caused a leak in the Count's lab. Leak? Yes. It seems that a virus that can cause severe diarrhea leaked out and contaminated part of the water supply. As a result, more than 10,000 civilians are infected. How many Caldorii died? Not many died, but their excrement seems to have the possibility of secondary contamination. The civilians are panicking now. The queen looked even more displeased. I don't want to see any filthy people in my city. Therefore, an incident that didn't exist in history happened out of nowhere and then inexplicably set the tone. Azhara began a large-scale evacuation operation in the city. No, it was more accurate to say that it was banishment. A large number of moon guards and city guards carried shining magic weapons and wantonly drove the civilians away from Azhara. For a moment, the main city of Kalimdor, which stood in the center of the continent, was in chaos. On top of that, there was a rumor that an even more terrifying and deadly plague would spread in 2 days, which directly triggered a frenzy of fleeing among the residents. In just 2 days, this huge city with a population of more than 1 million was completely empty. The only place that wasn't affected was the inner city where the high elves lived. The songs were still sung and the dances were still danced. In the underground palace of the inner city of Azhara, the twins found Duque. Queen Sayla said in a teasing tone, "Yo, my dear spy, what do you think of the wave of refugees outside? Manaroth was going to descend soon. If there isn't enough blood, who knows if those guys will go berserk." This was obviously a test. If it didn't go well, it would be like mud falling on one's pants. Even if it wasn't shit, it would still be shit. As an honest and reliable young man, Dumoke was of course spouting nonsense with a straight face. "Oh. So what?" Duque's tone was full of disdain. On this small planet, a primitive race that doesn't even have interstellar warships or interplanetary teleportation portals. Even if they escape, where can they escape to? For me, completing the mission that Lord Jaden entrusted me with and opening a larger and more stable portal as soon as possible to welcome the Burning Legion's main force is my only task now. Whatever you want to do, just do it. It's none of my business. Chapter 1023. Were the Eridar Gemini suspecting Duque? The answer was yes. Because it was too sensitive for something to happen at this time. The Gemini's experience from working behind enemy lines told them that there must have been a leak. Someone was using this special method that went against the style of the Night Elves to save the elven civilians. However, no matter what the Gemini thought, they wouldn't really suspect Duque. Because Dooku was fully immersed in the great cause of opening the teleportation portal. Duque's knowledge of teleportation was so rich that it surpassed their professional Eridar warlocks in many areas. As a result, the matter regarding the teleportation portal was completely led by Duque. If someone told the Gemini that it was Duque who was secretly evacuating the civilians, the Gemini would be the first to not believe it. After all, this was contradictory. The evacuation would only last for a while. The destruction and death brought by the Burning Legion would last forever. What Duque was doing was speeding up the destruction of this planet. When Duque finished adjusting the largest teleportation portal built based on the Well of Eternity and teleported Archimonde and even Sargeras over, the situation would be set. Duque's current behavior was completely that of a loyal subject of the Burning Legion. The Gemini was just asking. Then they turned their gaze to the most unreliable High Elves. The Empress faction was mostly madmen who pursued power. They didn't care about the lives of the lower-class civilians. As long as they could obtain the power to break through their limits, their thirst for power would be satisfied. Looking at those ignorant idiots who worshipped Sargeras as their creator and god, the Eridar Gemini laughed coldly at the same time. Idiots. Just hold on to your hope and wait. Auras couldn't stop giggling. After your planet is destroyed, you'll probably have the same expression as those idiots before. Queen Solola's had clear contempt. Who knows, there might be a great Void Lord among these self-proclaimed High Elves. There's only one Infernal Affairs. Interestingly, even though they had come into contact with countless civilizations and destroyed countless planets, the Eridar people still didn't understand the meaning of the word Infernal Affairs. The Burning Legion's invasion continued. Every night at the most suitable time to open the portals were opened one by one. From small teleportation portals the size of the palace's side hall to large teleportation portals that were 20 meters wide and 60 meters tall, The elite demons of the Burning Legion streamed out one after another. What was rare was that these demons did not attack immediately. Instead, they were all stuffed into sardines and placed densely in the underground palace of the royal family in Azhara City. Coward. This is the behavior of a coward. Manarotha's roar shook the entire underground palace. On the 100-meter-high roof, the sand was shaken and fell down. The Lord of the Abyss waved the double-headed sword, but as if he were performing, he only dared to swing it on the spot and did not dare to let the tip of the sword move half an inch forward. Because there stood a seemingly insignificant existence. Duque. Idiot. Since even Lord Archimond wants you to accept my moderation, I will not allow you to do so. Both commanders have set opening the largest portal as their top priority. This proves one thing. The importance of planet Azeroth is far beyond the imagination of a pig-headed demon like you. Duque acted like a true Lord of the Void, mercilessly lecturing Manaroth, who had been defeated by him. But look at these demons. Are they still the mighty warriors of the Burning Legion? They're worse than dogs. Not daring to challenge Duque's authority, Manaroth was not stupid and changed to a roundabout way to ask for permission to fight. Duque glanced at the huge portal that was about to be completed by the Burning Legion's dark craftsmen. Forget it, leaving a fool like you here won't be able to guard the portal. Then bring the Lords of the Abyss to cause trouble. Do whatever you want, the more the merrier. Everyone could hear the sarcasm in Duque's words, but Manaroth felt as if he had been pardoned and brought his underlings to work. Karzak, Khazragar. Guard this place. Duque said without turning his head. Yes. Understood. After the two promises, these two lords of the apocalypse who had been killed on Mount Hyjal 10,000 years later, listened to Duque's orders like loyal dogs at this point in time before they were killed 10,000 years ago. This scene was truly comical. An hour later, all the night elves in the Kaldorii Empire were alarmed. One by one they raised their heads. In their perception, the world that had been bustling with noise a moment ago had suddenly become silent. There was no night wind and every leaf in the forest outside the window was drooping. There was neither the sound of wind nor the chirping of insects. Only the loving light of the moon goddess Elune poured down from the branches in the form of moonlight and shone on the cheeks of the night elves. The expensive magic lamps that would never be extinguished at night all lost their luster, and every night elf city fell into a short and strange silence. What happened? Where's the magic power of the Well of Eternity? In the darkness, countless elves exclaimed. However, their panic and agitation were the greatest contrast to the lackluster magic power tributary below the city that did not even have the slightest ripple. At this moment, all the elves felt that the world they were familiar with was deviating. The magic power that was once extremely familiar and powerful seemed to be leaving them in fear under the threat of the goddess of fate. In the dark, it seemed that something sinister was descending, as if some terrifying existence was waiting for them at the crossroads of fate. An invisible black hand was secretly guiding and manipulating everything with its unparalleled power. The elven arcanists subconsciously looked around and found that many monsters that had been imprisoned in the magic prison, from the smallest magic dragons to the extra-large dragon beasts, were all running out of the prison cells. Unexpectedly, they thought that these monsters would immediately turn on the elves after gaining freedom and take revenge on the masters who had imprisoned them. However, no matter what kind of monsters they were all trembling and even running around in panic. No one realized that they were doing everything they could to get away from Azhara City. All the elves who could sense the magic power felt their hearts skip a beat. Because at this moment all the wizards in the entire Kaldorii Empire had their connection with the Well of Eternity forcibly cut off at the same time. Chapter 1024. In the entire Kaldorii Empire, there were hundreds of castles of various sizes. Most of the castles' owners were no longer around. They gathered in the castles of the leaders of various regions, intensely discussing the intelligence from the Elune Sisterhood, the leader of the Nature faction. Queen Azhara brought in demons for the sake of new power? That's nonsense. The queen is not a fool. How could she bring in demons that are so powerful that they can destroy her? Just as the lords were arguing fiercely, these lords in gorgeous robes opened their eyes wide in horror. Everyone realized that from that moment on, the Well of Eternity no longer sent any magical response. Not only them but the entire Night Elf Empire, the entire Kalimdor continent and thousands of other species all felt the emptiness and loss in their hearts. Before this moment, they were more or less direct or indirect beneficiaries of the Well of Eternity's massive magical power. But after this moment their connection with the Well of Eternity was cut off. The power that they once enjoyed had now turned into nothingness. Unease and panic quickly spread among the people. Just like the Celestial Empire before Duke's transmigration, not to mention an indefinite power outage. Once human society returned to the Iron Age and needed candles for illumination, just the lack of Wi-Fi alone was enough to cause many young people who were heavily addicted to cell phones to suffer from mania. Now many people in Azhara who were unwilling to evacuate as well as the city guards, and even some of the moon guards, naturally wanted to ask for help from their queen and call for Azhara's guidance. The soldiers and civilians quickly gathered in front of the inner city gate of Azhara, and more people gathered. At the beginning there were hundreds of people at each gate but now there were thousands. On top of the gate, the sentries looked expressionless, neither opening the gate nor appeasing the surging crowd. Until midnight most of the elves who were still in the city rushed to the 4 gates of the inner city. Outside each gate, tens of thousands of elves gathered. Duque, who had asked the demon's eye to transmit images to him in the name of surveillance, secretly sighed in his heart. In his heart, even if this was transmigration, even if he knew that he could not greatly change the history of the ancient war, he still did not want to treat the innocent night elves as sacrificial lambs. Now Duque realized that his thinking was wrong. At this moment, those who were still in the outer city of Azhara were definitely not ordinary people. Magical power. We want magical power. Give me magic power, give it to me or I'll go crazy. To Duque's surprise, the people rioted. Some elves seemed to be venting their frustrations as they blasted fireball at the inner city of Azhara, which was still high and mighty and revered as holy half a day ago. The weak fireball that lacked magic power smashed into the inner city wall. Before it could touch the wall, it was blocked by the inner city's magic defense wall and turned into clusters of sparks and flames. Some of the elves frantically tore at their clothes and scratched at their purple skin with their not-so-sharp nails, leaving deep bloody marks that exposed their flesh. Some of the elves were crying and yelling. While shedding tears of blood, they were grabbing their compatriots beside them and tearing them apart in a frenzy. Some elves even started to set fire to the houses around the inner city in order to vent their dissatisfaction with the Empress. Looking at them, Duque took a deep breath. It was just like how the high elves suffered from magic addiction after losing the Well of the Sun. Now even their beautiful faces had become hideous and distorted. These fellows who had lost their rationality were undoubtedly drug addicts. However, because the magic density of the original Well of Eternity was many times higher than that of the Well of the Sun, they were addicted to the Well of Eternity magic, which was many times stronger than the original Blood Elves in history. When the addiction flared up, drug addicts could trample on all conscience in the world and murder all the beauty in the world. Duque suddenly understood that the fall of the once prosperous Kaldorii Empire was not without reason. At this moment Queen Azhara was beside Duque. Azhara was still the same Azhara, but the scene in front of her was no longer the one she was familiar with. Azhara's golden eyes witnessed the scene of the city falling into destruction, the buildings that were quickly turning into ruins in the flames, the sea of fire that was gradually joining together, and the crazy elves who were murderous to their compatriots. She looked around and found that the inner city wall that protected the high elves was still intact. Are these my beloved people? Queen Azhara was trembling all over. Savis, who was beside the queen, stepped forward. Your Majesty, do you see this? These are all lowly people who appear to be obedient, but in reality they don't care about your rule and benevolence. Everything in front of us is worthless. For a more perfect world, all imperfections should be swept away. Swept away. When Duque heard this word he only felt disgusted. Weren't the high elves the ones who abused the magic of the Well of Eternity and caused millions of subjects to be deeply addicted to it? At this moment Queen Azhara turned around and faced Duque. May I ask if the most trusted servant of Creator Sargeras, the commander of the heavens, the lord of the infernal underworld, also agrees with us doing this? Duque's disgust for Azhara deepened. This was a so-called ruler who pursued perfection. Everything a perfect queen did had to be perfect. Of course, Azhara couldn't allow her city to be tarnished by those addicts. But as a perfectionist, she couldn't open her mouth to announce the purification of her subjects. "Ah, you want me, a fake Void Lord, to be the scapegoat?" Duque laughed coldly. "Isn't it your right as a queen how to deal with your subjects?" This seemingly ambiguous sentence made Azhara and Savis think that they had gotten enough hints. Savis nodded first. If Sir Mark Dooku says it must be done, then it must be done. Moreover, the other commander of the heavens, Sir Manaroth, also thinks that purification is necessary. I have always believed that in the name of pursuing glory, sacrifices are unavoidable. Moreover, these are thugs who tarnish the glory of Her Majesty's holy city. Azhara had briefly met the unforgettable Manaroth with her chief counselor, and she had fallen head over heels for the towering servant of the Creator. Seeing that the two commanders of the heavens had agreed, the Shadow Queen Azhara nodded awkwardly. Savis lowered his head. "Your wisdom transcends the galaxy." The queen accepted his praise with the calmness of an emperor. She received many compliments every day. This was a major part of her life. As if she couldn't bear to see the carnage that was about to happen, Azhara asked, "Will this last for a long time? Isn't the Creator coming soon?" Chapter 1025. Duque said neutrally. "Dark energy extracted at the cost of life and destruction will undoubtedly hasten the arrival of Lord Sargeras. Then I have no objections." The queen sighed as if she was bemoaning the state of the universe and the fate of mankind. She placed her hand on her chest. "Yes, I hope that when Sargeras comes I can be the first to know. If I can't personally greet him here, I will be very regretful. I also really hope to let you know in advance," Duque said without a trace. "Now please leave, Queen. I have to open the portal." The queen bowed absent-mindedly. Her eyes seemed to be completely immersed in the huge and psychedelic portal in front of her and the true meaning of the gods. That's right, in Azhara's mind she began to imagine the world she dreamed of. An even greater planet. Every inch of land on the planet was her territory. There were no more ice or ancient gods to stop her from extending her power. Everywhere there were glorious monuments erected in her honor. This planet would no longer be called Azeroth like people were used to. No, it should be called Azhara. For the queen's hometown, this was such a fitting name. Sir. She said it to herself twice and she was intoxicated by it. She should have made this change a long time ago, but it did not matter now. Besides, she had an even more attractive idea. Indeed, her face was exceptionally perfect. It was the symbol of her people. But there was something more glorious and greater. Soon he would come. His name was Sargeras. She whispered, "Sargeras. God Sargeras." A smile that was almost childlike flashed across her face. His partner Azhara. Accompanied by the almost crazed whisper, the tall and slender figure disappeared from the gate. Duque was speechless. "Crazy woman. If I tell you that Sargeras does not like you at all, will you kill yourself in anger?" In recorded history, Sargeras had only F***ed one woman. Yes. 10,000 years later, when he possessed Medivh, he F***ed the standard green-faced, fanged Garona, and gave birth to a monkey called Medon. Oh, a mixed blood. Do you have measurements of 60, 50, and 60? Do you have green skin? Do you have hideous little fangs? No. I'm sorry, but you're not qualified. Duque let out a long sigh in his heart. He fully activated his best actor power and announced loudly in front of the Eridar twins and the other Void Dukes with a mocking expression, "Open the door." Following Duque's announcement, the 4 gates of Azhara's inner city finally opened slowly. The elves outside the door all crowded forward like a surging flood. They were certain that Queen Azhara would eventually answer their pleas. However, the one who appeared in the palace wasn't an empress, a minister, or a ceremonial official. It wasn't something that the night elves had seen before either. Instead, it was the Burning Legion, a demon army that represented death and destruction. A 4-legged creature with strong canine-like limbs, bright red skin with black spots, long white bull horns, and 2 sharp black whip-like tentacles. This was the infamous Hellhound of the Burning Legion, even in the next 10,000 years to the mages. Looking at the hellhounds that formed a huge carpet behind the inner city gates, The night elves who were about to charge forward let out sharp shrieks. The tragedy officially unfolded at this moment. The elves at the front retreated, and the elves at the back who had become reckless due to their magic addiction surged forward crazily. When a few elves at the front tried to cast magic, their spellcasting ability was temporarily sealed by the hellhounds, spell block, and their end was inevitable. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the first victim of a demon on planet Azeroth was born. The hellhound easily used its huge horns to break open the stomach of the unlucky fellow. Then, with its mouth that was as sharp as a bird's beak but filled with sharp teeth, it tore out the long intestines in the elf's stomach. Ah! The heart-wrenching screams instantly ignited the panic of the people. They only wanted to see Queen Azhara and vent their dissatisfaction and resentment for losing the magic of the Well of Eternity. They never thought that they would be greeted with such an inhumane massacre. Tens of thousands of elven magic addicts were drowned by the even more terrifying hellhound tide within minutes. Tons of fresh blood gathered at high speed and filled the entire moat of Azhara's inner city. Manarotha's huge figure appeared at the city gate that was slightly narrow for him. He swung his double-headed sword that weighed several tons and burst into the most joyous laughter since he descended. Ha ha! Go, my little bastards! Massacre! Destruction! Tonight is the Burning Legion's feast of death. Ah! Beside him was the Hound King Hacker, who had been bestowed with power and had advanced to a low-level lord. Hacker's body was covered in light and shadows, and the space around him rippled like water. Countless hellhounds were leaping out of this special portal for hellhounds, allowing even more hellhounds to directly arrive from the distorted void to participate in this massacre. Not only low-level demons like the hellhounds and demon guards, but even the lords of the abyss under Manaroth had entered. Those massive war machines that looked like dragons turned into bulldozers and smashed the tall and beautiful elven houses as easily as a pile of toy blocks. The continuous rumbling sounds spread from near to far, all the way into the distance. Azhara, which had always been a city that never slept, welcomed light after a short period of darkness. Unfortunately, this was the light of destruction. Every fire represented the collapse of a 1,000-year-old cultural relic house, symbolizing the death of a double-digit number of elves. Krasis, riding a huge red dragon, was hovering outside Azhara City. He was dumbfounded as he watched the scene unfold before him. Impossible. Why didn't he stop this even though he knew that this would happen? Krasis was a little confused. He could not understand why Duque did not stop this destruction, even though he knew that his goal in coming to the ancient war was to protect history. Who is he? Krasis? The huge red dragon asked. Krasis did not know how to answer, because any spoilers from him could very well affect the attitude of the dragons towards Duke 10,000 years later. In the end he answered vaguely, "He is the leader of our alliance, a great being whose soul will not fall into the abyss even if he is cursed with the darkest of curses." Chapter 1026. The Red Dragon was non-committal. What are we going to do now? The Red Dragon's combat power was indeed strong, but it depended on who it was compared to. If it was just the Night Elves, then as long as it did not encounter a Breaking Dawn mage or a mage tower, the Red Dragon could come and go as it pleased. If it was the Burning Legion's air force, then it would be a different story. Krasis knew very well that if Mount Hyjal did not have the domineering magic circle that forbade high-altitude flight, the result of the battle might be rewritten. The Burning Legion's air force was far more terrifying than imagined. Krasis shook his head. Let's go back. We must inform the other races and unite all the powerful and native creatures of Azeroth. At the same time, the messengers came to Fort Raven every few minutes. All the messengers wanted to see the Master here because there was new news every time. Every news was equally terrible for Ravencase. No matter what, there was no way to obtain magic power from the Night Elves. Even the most experienced wizard here was helpless. In addition, the spell power that relied on the Well of Eternity to provide the source had also failed, and it had caused unfortunate results in one or two places. Panic happened one after another and they were almost numb to it. It was only at this moment that Ravencase realized that after losing the Well of Eternity, and with the failure of magic communication, it was almost impossible to maintain law and order with the power of mortals. The middle and low-ranking officials in various places could have avoided chaos, but these officials were in chaos. Even if the lords had received the news early, they were not sure of the authenticity of the news and did not pass the news to the middle and lower levels, which directly led to the current chaos. The most important places, the areas near Azhara, had been cut off from news, and it boded ill rather than well. The moon guards, who were once proud of, could not even compete with the most primitive ordinary warriors who relied on their own physical strength. At least the ordinary warriors would not be addicted to magic. Damn it! Savis, you evil man who should go to hell. How much do you want to bewitch our queen? Ravankaze angrily hammered the table. Tyrant was not afraid of the angry eyes around her. She stood up and said righteously, "No. Your Excellency Ravankaze. Let me emphasize once more. This operation was personally approved by Queen Azhara. Enough. The gods belong to the gods. What belongs to the emperor belongs to the emperor." Ravankaze interrupted Tyrant. Tyrant's expression was ugly, her chest heaving with anger. This was also Kaldoriai's chronic ailment. Even though this was an era where deities frequently appeared, Kaldoriai was undoubtedly a kingdom ruled by emperors. The great nobles, who controlled a large number of troops and power, were very sensitive to the interference of gods and churches. Tonight, there were a total of 118 lords gathered in Fort Raven, which accounted for less than a quarter of the entire Kaldoriai Empire. More lords chose to wait and see, or directly moved their families into the inner city of Azhara, firmly choosing to stand on the side of the queen. Even though they looked like they were rebelling now, the slogan they were shouting was still, "Long live the Empress." We must protect the king and eliminate the side of the emperor. At this moment, Malfurion suddenly strode in from outside the hall, accompanied by a tall green giant and a short but fair-skinned humanoid creature that the lords had never seen before. Ravankaze, this is no longer a simple battle for the throne. If you think that there are no traces of the gods in this war, then you are wrong, Malfurion yelled and then put down a magic crystal on the huge military map. The next second, a huge three-dimensional projection appeared over the military hall of Fort Raven. It was a huge figure not much smaller than the majestic gate of Azhara. A fat but dragon-like lizard-like lower body, coupled with an extremely swollen humanoid upper body, and a terrifying double-headed sword that could easily cut down an arrow tower. All the evidence supported the horror of the Burning Legion that Tyron spoke of. What is it? Ravankaze could not hide his trembling. At this time, the male human beside Malfurion, who was shorter than the night elves, stood up and bowed to the elven lords. "Dear lords, greetings. I am a human from another world. My name is Roddick. As a person whose hometown is also threatened by the Burning Legion, I have come here to report the intelligence of the Burning Legion." After some opening remarks, Ronan said in a deep voice, "This monster is the vanguard of the Burning Legion, the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, who has destroyed countless planets." As soon as Ronan's voice trailed off, there was a burst of gasps from the lords. Destroyed countless planets? The lords wanted to accuse Ronan of exaggeration, but after seeing Manaroth easily destroy a mage tower that kept releasing lightning magic at him, no one dared to say anything. "If you still need evidence, there is." Ronan snapped his fingers. In an instant, in the middle of the liege lords, under the illumination of the bright torches and the focus of their gazes, beside the table with the military map, a slender but shorter human figure appeared. She seemed to appear out of thin air, twisting the air and appearing in front of everyone. "Who?" Ravankaze was the first to draw his sword. "She is not the enemy," Tyrant and Malfurion said at the same time. The next moment, a masked woman with the same fair skin as Roddick appeared in front of the elven lords. She silently offered another magic crystal and placed it on the table. The lords were in an uproar when the image and voice were released, because the main character in the video was their most revered and respected Queen Azhara. In the image, Queen Azhara turned around and faced the side. "May I ask if the most trusted servant of the Creator Sargeras, the commander of the heavenly realm, the lord of the infernal underworld, agrees with our actions?" Everyone here was a senior noble of the Kaldoriai Empire. Of course, they understood what the queen's words, which were full of political art, meant. They, the lords of the various lands, had been abandoned. Mercilessly abandoned. When the queen was preparing to welcome the so-called god, she didn't even consider informing them. The resentment of being betrayed and abandoned filled the hearts of all the lords in an instant. Almost every lord wanted to roar at the sky to vent the rage in their hearts. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.